Part 96. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 952. In his more than 20 years of life, Xiaolin has never sent flowers to anyone, and he has never received flowers from others. His family background is not very good, his appearance is not particularly handsome, and he has no outstanding talents. He was neither sweet nor coaxing. Chasing Fan Lily was the boldest thing he had ever done. He had never been in love before and had never been confessed by a girl. Now seeing such a big man, Xiaolin's cheeks turned red as the roses turned red. Someone next to him asked him who sent the flowers. He flipped through the card awkwardly. There were affectionate words written on it, and only a few words were written at the end of the signature. You guess who I am. Xiaolin racked his brains to think, but still couldn't figure out who would give him flowers. At first, he originally guessed it was Lily, because after he moved out yesterday, he originally wanted to break up with Lily right then and there, but Lily hung up the phone and didn't give him a chance to break up. Xiaolin couldn't help but start to wonder if it was Lily. Lily didn't want to break up with herself, so in order to save him, she came up with such a method. But after he asked someone about how many hundreds of dollars this bouquet of flowers cost, he dispelled his doubts, because no one knew better than him how much Fan Bei's monthly salary was and how much money he could earn. Her salary is just enough to pay the rent. She can't afford such a large bouquet of flowers, but it will definitely make her feel distressed. Fan Bei has always been thrifty. Even if she wants to beg him to get back together, she can't use this method. On the contrary, it is more likely that she called him to beg him, so this flower cannot be from her. And he didn't know anyone he knew well in Binhai. Most of the women he knew around him knew his true situation, and most of them had no interest in him. He himself also knows his own affairs. He is not handsome, his family background is not good, and his career has just started. Even a rich woman would not take the initiative to pursue him. He thought of the scene when Josephine hugged him last night, and a creepy feeling came to his heart. What Lily said at that time. At this time, it began to appear in his mind, and Xiaolin threw the flowers into the trash can as if he had seen a ghost. Before getting off work in the evening, Josephine thought of cultivating a relationship with Xiaolin and making him accept him again, so he drove downstairs of their company and waited for him to pick him up for dinner after work. This was considered a promise he had made yesterday. He moved to accept the words of Feng Zikan. The flower-sending incident in the company during the day made Xiaolin famous in the company, and everyone paid attention to him. When we came out from get off work together, we saw a man driving to pick Xiaolin up from get off work. Thinking of the bouquet of flowers someone had given him during the day, many people who saw this had a look of contempt in their eyes. In the next few days, Xiaolin would receive a bouquet of flowers every day, and the cards in these flowers contained words of love from the beginning. Later, he directly began to express explicit words such as love between opposite sexes is only for reproduction, while love between same sexes is true love. Xiaolin has gradually become famous in the company. Although he may be more than one person in the company collecting flowers every day, Xiaolin is the only one who insists on collecting flowers every day. Especially when the other recipients of flowers are women, Xiaolin's situation is particularly eye-catching. In addition, the rumor that Xiaolin was raped by a man has spread in the company recently, and the whole company has become confused. There was such a fuss that Xiaolin started to fear going to work every day, which lasted only 4 or 5 days. It seemed like a whole year had passed to him. He began to fear returning to Josephine's house after get off work. But apart from Josephine's home, he had nowhere to go. He regretted moving out of the house he rented with Lily, but his pride made him embarrassed. He took the initiative to call Lily to beg for mercy and confess his crime. There were more and more rumors about him in the company, and within a few days he became a famous figure in the company. Sometimes when he doesn't want to go home and wants to work overtime at the company, someone will always point fingers at him behind his back. Under such circumstances, Zhao Lin's pressure began to gradually increase. He couldn't eat or sleep every day, and he started to have nightmares every night. He had been constipated in the past 2 months, and now the pressure is getting higher, and the situation is getting worse. It's getting more serious. He began to avoid Josephine. Sometimes when Josephine was at home, he would hide in his room and not go out. Josephine naturally felt that something was wrong with him and started to touch him more and more. In the past few days, he knew that something was wrong with him. He didn't have much money, and even drove him to and from get off work every day. For this reason, the company saw more colleagues and gossiped more. It wasn't until the 6th day that someone sent another bouquet of roses, and a middle-aged man next to him laughed. Xiao Zhao is really capable. People send flowers every day. We have been working here for more than 2 years, and we have never seen anyone as popular as you. When a group of people in the company heard this, they all laughed. For a moment, Zhao Lin felt that his face was red and bleeding, and his skin seemed to be on fire. The recent ridicule and criticism from people behind the company made him unable to stay any longer. His temper gradually became violent. When others said this, he immediately turned his face and hit the middle-aged man on the face with the object in his hand. Passed by. They were just joking with him. Although he seemed to be watching the fun, the middle-aged man didn't expect that Zhao Lin, with his honest temper, would hurt someone. He was holding a folder in his hand, and it didn't hurt much if it hit his face. But the middle-aged man couldn't keep his face after being hit. He grabbed something and threw it at Zhao Lin without thinking. He cursed in his mouth, "You still dare to hit someone? You are like a bitch. Yes, you are not ashamed to be with a man. Being pursued by a man is embarrassing to you. Why are you angry?" When Zhao Lin heard this, he became even more furious. He threw away the things in his hands and rushed forward. They got into a fight, and although they were pulled away in the end, they were still called into the office by the manager to talk. Because it was Zhao Lin who made the first move, the manager left Zhao Lin alone after criticizing the middle-aged man. He pointed out that his recent reputation has had a very bad impact on the company, and if he continues like this, he hopes he will resign. When he got off work in the evening, Josephine drove over to pick him up again. He saw that the corner of Zhao Lin's mouth was still injured, and the glasses he used to wear on his face were gone. His expression was a little gloomy, and he held a cardboard box in his hand. A lot of things. When he saw Josephine coming to pick him up, there was no smile on his face. Josephine motioned for him to get in the car and couldn't help but ask, "Aaron, why are you injured?" It was okay if he didn't say this. As soon as he said this, Zhao Lin thought of recent events, and a fire started to rise in his heart. He suppressed his anger and replied coldly, "I resigned." Josephine was shocked when he heard that he had resigned. He turned to look at him and saw Zhao Lin with his head lowered and his teeth clenched tightly. He could see the pimples on his face that were not yet white. I felt inexplicably bored. The old saying is true, the fragrance is far away and the smell is near. The two of them used to be far apart. Josephine occasionally went to Zhao Lin's house to tease him. He liked him as much as he liked, but now that they lived together, he began to find it inconvenient. The place where he lives alone now is not big, just 3 bedrooms, 2 living rooms and 2 bathrooms. After there is an extra person in the family, as long as Zhao Lin is in the public bathroom, he will almost occupy it, and this person's hygiene habits are not it was particularly good. Sometimes the clothes and pants he changed out of after taking a bath would be left everywhere at home. Josephine looked at him everywhere and disliked him. If he hadn't thought about eating him into his mouth quickly, he really wouldn't be able to bear it for a whole day. When I liked him before, it was good to see him do everything, but now I felt tired of it. I even felt tired of watching him pull out a few extra tissues at home. Josephine endured the nausea in his heart and reached out to touch his bruised face. "Face, pretending to be distressed. "Why are you injured? Did you get beaten?" His fingertips were cold, and when they fell on Zhao Lin's face, he almost jumped up like a wounded hedgehog. Without thinking, he reached out and hit Josephine on the back of his hand. "Don't touch me." As soon as these words were spoken, the pretended concern on Josephine's face quickly disappeared. His eyes slowly became colder, and a sarcastic sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. "What do you mean? I have played with many men, but this time I was so blind that I almost lost my hand and met a man like Zhao Lin." The first time he played a game and brought a man home, now Zhao Lin was eating his own food and drinking his own food, and was arrogant to him, thinking he was something. Josephine felt fierce in his heart, and he suppressed the urge to let him go at the moment. Zhao Lin immediately had the urge to get out of the car and took back his hand that was so hot from the beating. When Zhao Lin was first touched by Josephine, it was just a subconscious act to open his hand. After the beating, he heard Josephine's angry voice, and then he came to his senses. He was still a little angry at the moment, but he thought he is still living in Josephine's house. He has no home to go to and little money. Now he has no job. He will have to stay at Josephine's house for a while in the future. At least he can move on to the house after he finds a new job and gets paid. From the time of renting to moving out, he could not fall out with Josephine during this period. In fact, he vaguely regretted his previous attitude, but he couldn't bring himself to apologize. Seeing that Josephine didn't speak, Zhao Lin thought this was the case. It passed like this, and I felt relieved. Originally, Josephine was planning to have fun until the end of this game since it had already started, but now he naturally lost interest. He decided to cut the knot quickly and drive Zhao Lin out after getting his body. Zhao Lin is very wary of him now, and for some reason, he is very defensive towards him. It seems that taking it slow will definitely not work, so he decided to be more direct. He can't stand the poor boy Zhao Lin staying here for a day. His home. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 953. When he returned home, Josephine originally suppressed his anger and wanted Zhao Lin to sit outside and chat with him. Who would have thought that Zhao Lin, holding the box, said he was too tired and subconsciously wanted to go back to the room to hide from him. Such an attitude Josephine couldn't feel it, and he sneered in his heart. This Zhao Lin is so ungrateful that he treats his own home like an inn and doesn't pay a penny to live in his own home. Now that he has asked him to sit with him for a while, he wants to go inside. He really thinks that his room is if you let him stay and the air conditioner is on, he is just a guest. He doesn't pay a penny for water and electricity, and he has his own food and drink. Recently, he drives him to and from get off work. When Josephine took advantage of others in the past, he didn't think it was a big deal, but now Zhao Linyi takes advantage of him like this. But he felt that he couldn't bear it anymore. He endured it again and again, and stopped Zhao Lin, who was about to open the door and enter the house. "Aaron, I don't know what I have done recently to make you have such a big opinion against me, but in order to resolve the misunderstanding between our brothers, we will have a good drink and say everything that is on our mind. If you think I'm sorry for you, you can leave now, otherwise you can talk to me carefully and don't act like a woman who keeps everything in your heart." Josephine's words made Zhao Lin panic for a while. He was not working now. He broke up with Lily again. Lily hasn't called to see him these days. There is really no way to go back shamelessly. He doesn't have much money, let alone renting a house. If he is kicked out now, he will really have no place. But gone. Although he didn't want to sit with Josephine at this moment, he was even a little resentful of Josephine because of losing his job, so he didn't want to pay much attention to him. But when he heard the threat in Josephine's words, he still didn't dare to refuse and agreed bravely. When talking to him properly just now, he had to act like someone owed him something. Now that he has a tough attitude, he is afraid. Josephson sneered. Thinking of what he had to do in the evening, his blood almost boiled. I'm going to open the wine first. You put the things away before you come back. Having been playing with men for a long time, it's not like he has never met someone who was unwilling to do so. When Josephson entered the circle in his early years, he also used certain drugs. However, as he grew older, he had already grown older. He hadn't touched these things for a long time, and he felt that this method was too inferior and did not show his ability at all. At first, I didn't want to use this method to deal with Xiaolin. I originally hoped that he could climb into his bed voluntarily, but now it seems that it is obviously impossible. He opened the wine, took out some things and put them into the wine. When Xiaolin came out, he kept drinking Xiaolin's wine, and the medicine took effect quickly. He gradually became confused. Just looking at a man whose face was flushed, and the small red pimples on his face became more and more obvious under the influence of alcohol, Josephson began to feel that the scene was not very beautiful, and he couldn't put it down. He even began to feel that the man was really a little disgusting, but thinking of the efforts he had put in these days and the anger he had suffered, he still took off Xiaolin's clothes. Xiaolin was constipated and started to apply oil on him. Josephson cursed. No wonder Xiaolin would sometimes stay in the toilet for more than an hour, and his breath smelled extremely bad when he spoke. If he forced himself in under such circumstances, it would not bring him a good feeling. There might still be nightmare-like memories left behind, so he gave Xiaolin some bowel-clearing medicine. He ran to the toilet 7 or 8 times. After all this time, Xiaolin was almost awake. By the time he took a shower and came out of the toilet, his legs were a little weak. "Siphon, there may be something wrong with the wine. After I got drunk, I started to have diarrhea." Josephson collapsed on the sofa with a wine glass in front of him. He had a gloomy face, obviously feeling a little uncomfortable because his plan for tonight was ruined. So happy. Xiaolin thought he was worried about his health, and said with a grateful face, "Thank you for taking care of me. I will go back to the room to sleep first. You should also go to bed early." Xiaolin had just had diarrhea many times, and Xiaolin looked depressed now. Although he had diarrhea successfully just now, he developed hemorrhoids due to excessive diarrhea. When he went to the toilet for the last time, there was a rush of blood. Hemorrhoids gushed out, startling Xiaolin. It was because of the hemorrhoid attack that he took a bath. He had had hemorrhoids before, but it had never been this serious. At this time, he didn't want to drink anymore. He just wanted to go home quickly. Go inside and rest. But the fat meat was almost eaten into his belly, so how could Josephson allow him to escape now? Remembering that in order to get Xiaolin into his mouth tonight, he opened a bottle of fine wine and spent so much time and effort. Now he can sleep if he wants, and there is no way. Josephson suddenly stood up. "Aaron, how do I treat you after we've known each other for so long? Let's talk about it tomorrow, okay?" Xiaolin's legs were now weak, and his private parts were still aching because of the diarrhea he had just had. He was covered in cold sweat, and he was so weak that he couldn't stand still. He was given medicine, and he drank red wine beforehand. Under the influence of the wine, the effect of the medicine was unexpectedly great. At this time, his whole face turned blue, and he really had no patience to talk to Joe. Siphon frowned as he continued speaking, "I'm a little sleepy." When Josephson heard this, he cursed, "I want to make it clear now." Xiaolin felt a little uncomfortable when he heard his tough tone. He pulled his face down, turned around and walked into the house without thinking. He usually seems to be a nice person, and he is good to outsiders, but he can't tolerate the people around him at all. The closer he is, the easier it is to be stabbed by him. Xiaolin will be stabbed at this moment. Josephson truly regarded him as a friend and brother, and the two of them lived together. Unlike before when they were strangers, He had some tempers that he would not show in front of Josephine before, but now he will naturally show them. But he didn't expect that his departure would completely ignite the anger in Josephine's heart. Thinking that he had paid so much, Xiaolin dared to lose his temper with him now. How could Josephine endure this? He was not Fan Bei. That fool, what qualifications does Xiaolin have to spread anger in front of him? He was eating his own food and living his own life, and now his temper was getting better. It wasn't his home, so he dared to rebel and leave. What did he think of himself? The next moment, Xiaolin felt Josephine jump up from the sofa. Before he could react, he was hugged by Josephine. Before Xiaolin had time to exclaim, someone pushed him smoothly. In a temporary room. What are you doing? He felt something was not right, and when he asked in surprise, Josephine had already torn off his clothes and tied his arms. In fact, he has played with men a lot of times, but it was the first time for Josephine to use force like this. At first, he was a little disgusted with Xiaolin, but gradually, the excitement came over, watching the man playing with him even though he was struggling and roaring, he might not be any worse than he was willing to be. Xiaolin was already thinner than him. Josephine had been hanging out in the gym all year round and had a powerful figure. It was not easy to knock down Xiaolin. Son, when he continued to struggle, Josephine slapped him in the face with a ferocious face. When the loud slap sounded, Xiaolin was completely stunned. His face was numb from being beaten, and Josephine's cold hands groped his body. He struggled desperately but couldn't get out at all. He wanted to shout for help, but this time Josephine's home was in a high-end community, and each floor only had lived in one household. In addition, the soundproof glass was used well during the decoration, so it was no use even if he shouted at his throat. He was no match for Josephine. Thinking that he would be raped by a man, waves of regret surged up in Xiaolin's heart. He remembered that Lily Fan had told him coquettishly that he and Josephine were too close. He remembered that Lily had told him before that he and Josephine were like lovers. He remembered that Lily had pointed at his nose during the quarrel. She scolded him and said he had no money or ability. How could Josephine date him if he had no purpose? Xiaolin thought of a lot at this moment. At that time, he felt that what Lily said was just meaningless, and he never thought that this day would come true. He felt that if Josephine really regarded him as a friend, how could he have such feelings for him? Heartfelt. He even broke up with Lily because of this. But at this moment, he was pinned down by Josephine. When he heard the man on top of him gasping for breath, Xiaolin cried and screamed. He only felt the heartbreaking pain coming from the place of shame. When Josephine broke into his body, the resentment and extreme pain made his voice hoarse, and he couldn't cry for a while. It's so tight. It's worth waiting for me for so long, Josephine was panting heavily, but Xiaolin only felt the burning pain spreading from his private parts, making him tremble all over. He thought that one day such a nightmare would appear to him. He was raped by a man. The feeling of the sky falling made Xiaolin couldn't help crying. His man's self-esteem was trampled under his feet. The more he struggled, the more hurt he felt. The pain in his vagina was as if pepper had been applied on it. He had been constipated for a long time. He had been injured during the bowel cleansing tonight. He had bled a lot before. Now, with Josephine's movements, the blood gradually drained out, dripping. It lubricates the two of them. Xiaolin struggled desperately from the beginning to his face turned pale at the end. Josephine collapsed on top of him, breathing heavily. You beast, you monster, you will be punished. Xiaolin's face was full of resentment, and his voice was hoarse. When Josephine left his body, he couldn't help but shed tears. The curse of hatred. To be continued. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 954. At this point, things were done even if they were not done. It was a waste of so much time, but it was not in vain that I finally had a good time. The first time a straight man tasted really good, although he didn't do it willingly, but he was forced to do it. At that moment, he had another feeling. Josephine was lifting his pants, and when he heard Zhao Lin's words, he sneered twice. The two of them were already at war with each other. He got Zhao Lin's body again, and the last trace of his feelings towards him. His patience had run out, and when he heard that he was still saying harsh words, Josephine picked up his belt and slapped Zhao Lin twice on his pale face without a trace of blood, until his cheeks turned red. Just grin. What kind of retribution? Are you suing me? Ha ha ha, I also said that you came to my door to hook up with me, fool. When he said the last two words, his eyes couldn't help showing contempt. Do you really think I want to be your brother? Have you ever looked in the mirror? You are trying to show off your face and temper with me. What the hell are you? And you dare to hit my hand? Zhao Lin thought about how dare he pick him up in the afternoon. In the scene of losing his temper, Josephine grinned, reached out to grab Zhao Lin's hair, and grabbed his head. He subconsciously wanted to struggle, but it was estimated that this action affected the wounds in his body, and he began to groan in pain again. Yelling, this look made Josephine laugh. Look at you like this, even women don't look down on you, but fortunately, the taste is pretty good, and it makes me feel good. Now get out of my house. The food, drink, and accommodation you had before will be regarded as my prostitution this time. I've paid you for it. But from now on, I don't want to see you again. I'm tired of playing with you. Get out. After he said that, he threw Zhao Lin, whose cheeks were red with anger, back on the bed, and pressed on him with all his strength. He pinched his butt and said, I'll give you half an hour to pack your things. Get out now. It was still dark outside at this time, and Zhao Lin was so weak that he couldn't stand up at all. He didn't expect that Josephine would dare to turn against him after doing such a thing to him, and he was stunned for a moment. This nightmarish experience made him unable to recover at all. When he heard the sound of Josephine closing the door when he went out, Zhao Lin seemed to wake up, threw himself on the bed and burst into tears. He really regretted it now. If he had listened to Lily earlier and seen clearly the true face of the beast Josephine, then he would not have ended up being raped by him. When he thought that he, a dignified man, had his body taken over by a man, Zhao Lin felt that the sky was about to fall. He thought that he didn't know what to do in the future. The severe pain before was like a nail, not only death. Deadly nailed into his body. It still remained in his memory, and it became a shadow that could never be gone away in his life. When he thought of his life being ruined by Josephine, Zhao Lin immediately gritted his teeth tightly, thinking of Josephine dared to rape himself and then told him to get out after he was done with it. A flame of hatred ignited in his heart. He wanted revenge. He couldn't let Josephine harm him like this and let it go. If someone finds out about this in the future, his life will be ruined. He will be too embarrassed to go back to his hometown. If he tells others about this, how will he be able to find a wife in the future, and how will he survive in Binhai? He was panicking and wanted to seek justice from Josephine, but as soon as he struggled to stand up, the secret place between his legs hurt like a knife. This was the first time he had been tortured like this. I had no tendency to like the same sex before. In addition, he was injured to begin with. The more excited Josephine was before, the more uncomfortable he felt. Now the injury was very serious. It hurts to move at this time. Zhao Lin lay on the bed and cried silently, but there was a knock on the door outside. Zhao Lin. I told you that you have half an hour to pack your clothes and leave, otherwise I will call security. 5 minutes have passed now. If you are still here after 25 minutes, Don't blame me for being rude. Josephine turned against the standard and refused to recognize anyone. He had no intention of thinking about his old relationship after the incident. When Zhao Lin heard this, his eyes were split with hatred and he shouted, "Get out of here." Josephine outside the door sneered twice, "Should I get out? This is my home." "You are not overestimating your own abilities. You are asking me to get out. I am interested in your body and have been your friend for a few days. Who do you really think you are? Is it done?" When Zhao Lin heard this in the room, he was so angry that he trembled all over. He didn't expect Josephine to fall out so quickly. Now that things have happened, Zhao Lin is really afraid that Josephine will keep his word and will call security guards to chase people away in more than 20 minutes. He can't be discovered like this. He endured the pain and stood up. While crying, he found his own clothes to wear. When he was putting on his pants, his breasts rubbed against the injured area, causing his body to tighten in pain. Thinking of what happened today, he burst into tears again. At around 3 o'clock in the morning, he was penniless when Josephine kicked him out of the house with a bag of clothes. The community where Josephine lives is a group of high-end garden houses and villas on the seaside. It's still dark and there are no cars around. Zhao Linqiang endures the excruciating pain in his body and walks to the bus stop. Everywhere is deserted. He can't bear it. She covered her face and started crying again. A little tired from walking, he wanted to go to the stop sign and sit on a temporary chair to wait for the bus. But as soon as he sat down, his butt jumped up again as if it was on fire. When he sat down, he was squeezed somewhere on his body. Pressure, the pain was severe, he must have been injured, because he could feel something flowing out of his body. In addition to the disgusting and dirty liquid left by Josephine, he also had the smell of blood on his body. Zhao Lin covered his face, feeling that he was no longer clean. He was a little desperate and resentful at this time, resenting the world and himself. He hates that there is no fairness in this world, hates that rich people like Josephine can play with him wantonly, but he still has no way to deal with him. He hates himself for not listening to Lily's words. If he had listened to Lily's words, he would have broken up with Josephine. Now that he is clean, he will not suffer such humiliation, and he will be ruthlessly abandoned by Josephine after being played with. Thinking that he no longer had a job, his girlfriend broke up with him, his body was ruined by that beast Josephine, he was now penniless, he was still out in the middle of the night, and he had nowhere to go. Zhao Lin felt like he didn't want to live for a while. But he was a little unwilling. Why should he die? The damn bitch Josephine is the one. Even if he is going to die, he must let Josephine get his retribution first. I used to be so good to him. He usually came to his home and always entertained her with delicious food and drinks. He even broke up with Lily just to buy an air conditioner and install it. He just wanted to make Josephine's life better, so the two started to quarrel. He stayed at Josephine's house for a few days, but he kicked him out. Zhao Lin cried like a child. With tears in his eyes, he suddenly thought of Lily's good fortune. After being brainwashed by Josephine before, he always felt that women were not good at everything, they were long-winded and troublesome, and they would only talk in his ears every day about having no money, buying groceries, paying water, electricity, and rent, etc. He was tired of hearing about all the trivial things. After reading this, Josephine began to feel nostalgic for the past, and only his own crying could be heard in the deserted surroundings. At least Fan Bei he wanted to read it at that time. But whenever he didn't go well at work and got angry at Fan Lily, she would not find a way to retaliate against him, but would comfort him gently. At that time, he felt that Fan Bei's role was only to do laundry and cook, but when he thought that he had given her all his salary, he felt that he loved her enough, and he did not think about whether the salary was enough to cope with everything in life. He took her contribution for granted, and under Josephine's instigation, he still complained about Lily. It was only when he was really hurt that Zhao Lin realized how much he missed those days. If he had been firmer back then, loved Fan Lily more, and not been fooled by the illusion created by Josephine, wouldn't he have ended up like he did now? He regretted it and thought of Fan Beihi's previous love for him. No matter what he did, no matter what kind of temper he lost at her, every time she would always worry about her grown man's face and seek an apology from him first. He was hurt at the moment. I desperately want to go back to Fan Lily and let her comfort myself with her warm body. Think of this. Zhao Lin cheered up. He didn't have nowhere to go. He still had a home and a woman waiting for him. The woman came to Binhai from other places with him to develop. She loved him as much as her life. Both of them had already engaged, he could go back and start over. This time he will definitely be considerate of Lily and will not be as cruel to her as before. From now on, no one will be able to separate the two of them. He will never pay attention to Josephine or Lisephine in the future. He will work hard to find a job again and be down to earth. Fan Beihi had to live with Beihi, and everything tonight passed like a nightmare. The two would have many children after they got married. He wanted to tell Beihi that he was willing to leave Binhai to develop. Fan Beihi had begged him for this many times before, but Zhao Lindu refused. He felt that Binhai was a good place for his development. Even though he knew that it might be more beneficial for Fan Lily to go to other cities, he still refused at that time. He was ignorant at that time, but after this incident he figured out that Binhai could no longer stay, and he would start over with Lily. He couldn't wait to share the news with Lily, and Zhao Lin even thought about Lily picking him up. He looked so excited when he was on the phone that his body was shaking uncontrollably. He picked up the phone. He had previously pulled Lily's phone number into the blacklist. Now with a trembling hand, he pulled Lily's phone number out of the blacklist and dialed it. Unfortunately, the phone on the other end is turned off. How Zhao Lin longed to get through Lily's phone before. Returning to the home that he felt was extremely depressing before, but now thinking about it, is the only home he would like to return to. At this time, Zhao Lin felt 1,000 times more disappointed, and in an instant he felt, it feels like being abandoned by the whole world. To be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Wan Erwr. Chapter 955. The sweet female voice on the phone mechanically repeated, "The number you dialed has been turned off." Sorry, the... Zhao Lin was a little dumbfounded as he listened to the female voice on the phone repeating this call several times until the phone automatically hung up. There was still a stiff smile on his face. After a while, he suddenly cried and laughed. When he spoke out, he was overwhelmed by a huge sense of disparity and panic. He squeezed the phone in his hand tightly, hugged the bus stop sign next to him, and started hitting it with all his strength. He took the first bus in the morning. He lowered his head and looked lost. The driver called him several times to put in coins, but he pretended not to hear. There were very few people taking the bus in the accommodation area. The driver he shouted several times and asked him to get out of the car because he had no money, but Zhao Lin stood numbly in the car and refused to move. In the end, the driver had nothing to do with him, so he could only curse twice as he thought he was unlucky, and the car drove in. Downtown. When he returned to the dilapidated downstairs of his rental house, Zhao Lin was holding clothes in his hands and almost burst into tears. He hadn't slept all night, his eyes were full of bloodshot eyes. After standing for a long time, his legs were actually tingling and almost losing consciousness. He dragged his exhausted body upstairs, and happened to meet Lily, who was about to go out. When he saw Lily, his eye circles suddenly turned red. The clothes in his hands were thrown to the ground. His lips moved but he didn't make a sound. "Zhao Lin? Why are you here?" Lily asked, and Zhao Lin burst into tears. Seeing Lily dressing up as if he was going to work, he sniffed, "Lily, wife, I know I was wrong, I really know I was wrong. I want to start over with you. From now on, my husband will listen to you. Josephine and I will cut off contact. I will never invite him to my home again. Wife. He thought of last night's conversation. The thing is, seeing Lily now is like an injured child seeing a relative. Lily stood on the stairs, staring at him coldly from above. His hair was messy, and the clothes he wore were as wrinkled as dried plum blossoms. He was dejected, and his shoulders and back were slumped, as if he had been greatly stimulated. When he talked about Josephine, he gritted his teeth. Looking at his legs when walking again, although he tried his best to stand up straight, they were still trembling. His hands were clenched into fists and placed on both sides of his thighs, holding them straight between his legs. She has been practicing martial arts for more than 2 months, and her nose is very good. She can vaguely smell the smell of blood and the body fluids of certain men on Xiaolin. This appearance proved that Xiaolin must have been touched by Josephine, and after playing with him, he kicked him out. Let's talk about it first. Seeing Xiaolin's scene, Lily curled her lips slightly, and then quickly took out the key from her bag. She was so generous and ignored past grudges. She had treated her that way before and was completely rude to her. Even because Josephine had quarreled with her several times, she not only didn't remember it in mind, but was willing to help her at this time. Compared to that bastard Josephine. Not to mention ruining your own body. After using such a despicable method to get him, he even kicked him out of the house afterwards. In contrast, Xiaolin agreed with tears in his eyes. Dragging heavy steps, he climbed the stairs step by step. He walked very slowly. The wound seemed to have become a little inflamed overnight, and something kept flowing out, making him feel uncomfortable all over. The thing was soaking in the wound, and now it stung and itched, making him want to scratch it. But the pants rubbed against the wound, and there was a heartbreaking pain, which was simply extremely torturous. Today is not Saturday, why didn't you go to work? Lily asked, and Xiaolin shook his head. He was embarrassed to say that he had been fired from the company, and he was afraid that Lily would kick him out after finding out. He hesitated, trying to find an excuse to admit his mistake to Lily, but Lily sighed. Take a breath. Don't you live in Josephine's house? How come you are now? Don't mention him to me. When he mentioned Josephine, Xiaolin was like an angry lion, his eyes were red, he pointed at Lily loudly and started to curse. He was filled with anger in his heart. He had nowhere to vent, and he kept it to himself after suffering such a thing. He couldn't beat Josephine again and again. There was nothing he could do to him, so he could only go home in embarrassment. It was pitiful enough, but Lily couldn't bring it up. Witchpot deliberately mentioned Josephine's name in front of him. Xiaolin was so angry that he suddenly found an outlet, and cursed loudly at Lily. Are you annoyed? When you come back, you say Josephine's name. I told you not to mention him. Don't mention him. Are you a human? Do you understand human speech? Do you like him? Why do you mention his name? He doesn't want to marry you at all, so what's the point of mentioning him again and again? He doesn't like you at all, idiot. Xiaolin is like a hedgehog at this moment. He was hurt by Josephine, and he instinctively wants to vent these hurts through some methods. At this time, Lily is in front of him, and the former fan Lily is the closest person to him. He would naturally and instinctively vent his anger on Lily. Even if he actually regretted the words as soon as he said them, he could not say an apology anyway. The scene became a little cold all of a sudden. Xiaolin was a little worried and nervous, but also a little unsure, but if he was asked to apologize to Lily now, he really couldn't do it. He had been hurt too much, and he was anxious. He needs a warm embrace to heal, instead of accepting Lily's cross-examination at this moment, about whether he can go to work or not, and about Josephine. He doesn't want to hear this at all. He lowered his head, his expression like a lion that was wary of its surroundings after being injured. Lily sneered in her heart, but a look of silence appeared on her face. Okay, I won't mention it if I don't mention it. She spoke so simply and was not hurt by her previous anger. Instead, Xiaolin felt a little apologetic. He glanced at Lily and moved his lips. I'm so tired. Can you make me something to eat? I want to take a nap. In the past, if Fan Bei heard him speaking in such a tone, she would definitely forget her grievances and come to comfort him first, but now Lily just glanced at him and shook her head. I'm sorry, I have something else to do. I need to go out. The most I can do is let you drink a glass of water. When will you leave? Leave? Xiaolin was a little confused when he heard this. Why would anyone let him go today? Where else could he go? He is already homeless. First, Josephine let him go, and now Lily also let him go. Xiaolin suddenly felt a sense of resentment and ridiculousness in his heart. I won't leave, Lily. I have thought clearly when I come back this time. I am prepared to live a good life with you. We will not quarrel in the future. There is no Josephine or anyone else among us. From now on, I will be yours. Hearing this, Lily's eyelids drooped to block the coldness in her eyes. Xiaolin also thought that others were a high-quality solar heating appliance that could heal injuries and absorb cold. When he was injured and felt cold, he thought of his ex-girlfriend. When she got angry, why didn't she see him and think about Lily Fan? When he is in a bad mood, he uses his girlfriend as a tool to vent his temper. After making some money, he feels great. When people are gentle to him, he feels that it is only natural. If he loses his temper with others, if they are unhappy, he is a girl. What kind of person is he who is delicate and pretentious, and why does he think that other people's lives should revolve around him? He was hurt by Josephine and fell into Josephine's trap. When he first tried to persuade him, he thought that he was right in everything. Fan Bei he didn't like hearing a few words from him. But now that he is uncomfortable and in pain and crying, he knows. He came back to find himself, but unfortunately the soul of the girl who wanted to have a good life with him is probably not in this world at this time. I am not his solar energy, I am just the one who wants to find justice for the original owner. You're not leaving? Xiaolin, I'm sorry. If you had told me a few days earlier, I'm afraid it would have been okay, but it won't work now. Lily shook her head. When Xiaolin heard this, he looked at her with a shocked and somewhat hurt look. Staring at her, do you have someone else you like? Are you with someone else? He was like a heartbroken husband who caught his wife cheating. Lily shook her head, and Xiaolin burst into tears. Lily, really, forgive me. I know I was wrong. Josephine is not a human being. He has other purposes for me. You are right. I should have listened to you in the first place. He also kicked me out. I have no place to go. Let's start over, okay? Let's start over, he begged, tears streaming down his face. I will never let you buy food and cook for him again. If I bully you again, I will definitely stand by your side. Really? If you don't want to stay in Binhai, I have quit my job. I will accompany you to where you want to go, Lily. Xiaolin was a little incoherent, but Lily shook her head. I'm sorry, Xiaolin, you can stay here for one day, because the landlord has made an appointment with me and will come to take over the house tomorrow. You just need to find a house and move out before then. As for the matter between you and Josephine, if he hurts you, you should choose to call the police and let the police help you. I have resigned from my job here. I talked to my mother on the phone. I have bought today's plane ticket and am ready to go back, she finished. Seeing Xiaolin staring at a pair of red eyes, obviously not expecting to hear this, Lily paused. I'm going to the store today to collect my last paycheck. I'm sorry. It took Xiaolin a long time to react to what she said. When he heard clearly that she was leaving Binhai, Zhao Lin almost collapsed. He shook his head desperately and wanted to reach out to grab Lily. No, Lily, let's go together, let's go back together, why are you leaving all of a sudden? Stay here well. To be continued. P.S. Although I asked for a monthly vote very passionately in the morning, and although I know it's annoying to keep asking for votes, you can think of me as a timer alarm clock, because I can't control my vote-seeking behavior at all, and I'm going crazy. I will fight myself. Thinking about it makes me scared. Please give me a monthly ticket, blah blah blah. If you don't give me a ticket, I want to be a little expert selling newspapers. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 956. Originally, I came to Binhai because of you. The development here is not going well. I haven't gotten my diploma yet, so it's hard to find a job. My mother is old and alone. Since we have already after breaking up, I want to go back to my hometown to find a job and take care of her. There is nothing worth missing in this Binhai area, and I have never liked it here, so of course I have to leave. I have to go out first. There is still some food in the refrigerator. If you want to sleep, just sleep for a while first, but if Josephine hurts you, you should call the police. The law can punish him. After Lily finished speaking, she took out her phone and checked the time. Before Zhao Lin could speak, he turned around and left the house. Zhao Lin was left speechless. After a long time, when Lily left, he saw this empty house. He and Fan Lily had rented here for nearly a year. He made a vow in the room that he would marry Fan Lily in the future. The two had imagined that after many years, after they had saved their money, they would buy a house on the seaside, settle down completely, and have as many children as possible. Those words followed him as he worked when the two of them started to have conflicts and quarrels because of the unsatisfactory life. He had almost forgotten about it. Now when the surroundings became quiet, he suddenly remembered it. Some things always make him feel extremely painful after losing them. When he has them in his hands, he always feels dissatisfied and always criticizes Fan Lily, thinking that some of his unsatisfactory things are due to her. After Josephine intentionally or unintentionally provoked after that, he began to dislike Fan Beihee in everything, and he didn't like her. He really thought that with his own ability, he could find someone better than her in the future. But at this moment Lily turned around and went out without hesitation. She said she was leaving and going back to her mother. Zhao Linke burst into tears suddenly. He hates Josephine for ruining him. It not only destroyed some of his beliefs, but also destroyed his body and his possibility of future happiness. What did he use to chase girls now? What happened last night was like a shame in his life, nailed into his soul, and he could never get rid of it. Despair surged toward him like a tide, and he suddenly remembered what Lily had said before leaving, that if he was wronged or hurt in any way, he could call the police. Now he has no scruples. Before, he was worried that he would suffer such a big loss and didn't dare to speak out. He was afraid that Lily would dislike him when he found out, but now he thinks about it. Lily is leaving here anyway. She is breaking up with herself. She has nothing, and no one in Binhai knows him. He will also leave this sad place in the future. Even if someone knows that he was raped, what will happen? Even if he is embarrassed, he still wants Josephine, a piece of trash, to get retribution. Think of this. Zhao Lin wiped away his tears and dialed the police number on his cell phone. The police arrived soon and took him back. After knowing what happened to him, many people showed sympathy in their eyes. Josephine was quickly found by the police, but he did not admit that he raped Zhao Lin, but insisted that he had raped Zhao Lin. It was Zhao Lin who seduced him. He saw that I was rich, so he winked at me several times and hinted that he was willing to exchange his body for money. He seduced me for more than half a year before I agreed. I had avoided him for more than a month before. If you don't believe me, You can check it out. Josephine sat in the police station, crossed his legs and sneered, he climbed into my bed by himself, and for this reason he even stayed in my house and sent people to my door. How could I rape him? Look at him, what does it look like? Look at what I look like. If I want to play with a man, do I need to rape him? No, I'm not joking. If I really like someone, I'll throw some money out and hook my fingers, and they will automatically take off their clothes and pants. You're coming, do I need to use force? Josephine denied firmly, tapping his fingers on the table, and the policeman handling the case looked doubtful. To be honest, it is true that Josephine looks decent and handsome from the outside. The most important thing is that his family background is indeed very good. He is not bragging. He is a very popular person, even among people of the same sex. It's hard for anyone to dislike him. In comparison, Zhao Lin's face was filled with acne and his appearance was ordinary. He looked very ordinary and unremarkable. At this moment, he was angry. He blushed and looked a little pitiful, but the police were a little suspicious of him. After all, it was true that he lived in Josephine's home. The two had been living together before. It was said that the relationship between the two was particularly good. Zhao Lin's former colleagues also confirmed that Josephine drove him to pick him up from get off work the day before the incident. This situation did not look like Zhao Lin had been raped, but rather like two lively lovers having an awkward quarrel. The police suddenly had a headache. Zhao Lin was so angry that he trembled all over, pointed at Josephine and shouted, "You're talking nonsense, you're lying, you're cheating." When Josephine heard his angry words, the corner of his mouth curled up, "You say I'm a liar. You need evidence. You can't say that you shamelessly stayed with me in order to stay in my house. I rejected you, even though we did have sex bed, it's a matter of mutual consent between you and me, but now that I'm about to break up, you can't blackmail me, so you want to slander me, right?" He was confusing right and wrong. Zhao Lin had never thought that Josephine would be such a shameless man before. He was so angry that he couldn't speak. Josephine's sneer eyes hurt him all over. The final result was that the police naturally, it was determined that this murder case was due to insufficient evidence, and Josephine was released after recording a confession. Before leaving, he passed by Zhao Lin, sneered, and said quickly, "Dumbass." These words seemed to ignite the anger in Zhao Lin's heart. He could no longer bear it and rushed up to hit Josephine, but Josephine didn't need to do anything and was quickly restrained by the police around him. "You saw it, he was the one who did it first. Don't tell me that he sued me, I will sue him. You dare to beat people in the police station, just wait to be detained, you idiot." Josephine laughed and ignored it. He straightened his hair, straightened his collar, and walked away. If Zhao Linzhen is detained, his future files will be stained, his future job hunting will be affected, and his life will be ruined. I didn't expect the law to be so unfair. I originally thought I could get justice with the help of the police. Unfortunately, I didn't get justice. Instead, I was ridiculed by Josephine. Zhao Lin couldn't bear it and cried loudly. He really raped me, this beast, and he even caused me to break up with my girlfriend. Why don't you believe me? Why can't you catch him and lock him up? A group of policemen heard his cry and looked at each other. Perhaps because Zhao Lin was crying so hard, someone couldn't help but handed him a piece of paper. "Brother, listen to me. Even if your story is true, the law has not officially enacted the case of men being sexually assaulted. It will be difficult to arrest people. If he really did that to you, for this matter, the most we can do is mediate, hoping that he can compensate you some money, just as compensation, and the two of you reach a settlement. But Mr. Zhou just said that you live in his house, and the surveillance video downstairs of his house there is indeed a shadow of you coming and going in the past few days, not to mention someone testifying that you live with him. He wants to say that you are a couple living together, and there is nothing we can do." After the policeman finished speaking, Zhao Lin despair surged in his heart, and he patted Zhao Lin on the shoulder. At most you have to be more careful in the future. After. What's next? He and his girlfriend have broken up, and his whole life has been ruined. The result in exchange is that he will be more careful in the future? Zhao Lin wanted to laugh, but couldn't. Too many things happened in that day. When he came out of the police station with a tired pace, Lily had already gone home, picked up the luggage that had been packed long ago, sat in a taxi and headed for the airport. She took out her mobile phone and started to make up a text message. When Zhao Lin came out of the police station, her phone rang. The text message happened to be from Lily. She told some things about Fan Beihe and Zhao Lin's time together. Zhao Lin talked about the scene when the two were in college and the wishes in their hearts when they came to Binhai. She talked a lot. Zhao Lin burst into tears and felt heartbroken. The happy time at that time flashed in his mind. In a flash, he never dreamed that he would encounter such a nightmare experience when the two left school a few years later. When you said you were at Josephine's house that day, I knew you were going to break up with me, but I didn't dare to listen. I called you afterwards to beg you for reconciliation, but you blacklisted my phone number. I don't know where Josephine's home is, and I don't dare to disturb you in the company. I can only use the money I saved in the past 2 months to buy flowers for you. I want to make you happy, but I have been waiting for several days. God, you still haven't changed your mind. I think this is what we should do. Seeing this, Zhao Lin remembered the flowers sent by the company. He originally thought that they could never be sent by Lily, but he did not expect that the most impossible thing turned out to be the real fact. That beast Josephine treated him like this and hurt him. He hurt Lily. Lily even saved money on food and clothing and sent flowers to him, but he mistakenly thought they were from Josephine. For such a bad person, he lost his beloved self. As a woman, Zhao Lin began to feel regretful. Actually, there is a reason why I am so disgusted with Josephine. I used to follow him. I thought his background was too weird. He became friends with you out of nowhere. Suddenly there was such a person in our lives. After he got here, we often started to quarrel. I felt something was wrong. It turned out that he entered the hospital. I went to a gay bar, and I saw him drinking with others, and overheard him showing off to others, saying how he met you. Beihe typed out the words that Fan Beihe heard in the plot in the text message at this time, explaining how Josephine accidentally turned to his Weibo, how he started to treat him as prey, how he destroyed the relationship between the two, and finally just to get he told me everything about his body. To be continued. Carrot. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan Erwr. Chapter 957. He said that he likes to play this kind of game. He deceives a man into his body and then abandons it. This gives a special sense of accomplishment. I was so angry at the time that I thought about settling the score with him, but I know your character and you have never really experienced it. No matter what others say, you won't believe it. Even if what I see is obviously the truth, if Josephine doesn't admit it, you will only listen to Josephine's words and think that I am being petty. In order to prevent us from quarreling, I was also worried that I had misunderstood Josephine, which would deprive you of a real brother. But I was also afraid that you would be fooled, so I didn't have a good impression of Josephine from now on, and I didn't greet him like before. He is always enthusiastic, but he is a little more distracted. I have reminded you, but you don't believe it. You said that I ruined your brotherly relationship. For this reason, I can only try my best to prevent you from interacting with him, and I will not hesitate to quarrel and fight with him. And even once he almost hit me, but you didn't help me. At that moment, I felt very desperate. You would rather trust an outsider than your own girlfriend. I want to protect you and don't want you to be fooled by him, because he has played with many men in this way before. It's a pity that I couldn't protect you in the end. When I saw you this morning, I knew that you were hurt by him. I'm sorry, but it's a pity that I can't comfort you. I believe that there will be a girl who is gentler than me in the future and will become your guardian angel." After reading most of this text message, Zhaolin felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He was not a fool. He just didn't want to believe many things before, but now the nightmare has happened, and many things that happened before are now in his mind. As he passed by, he realized that what Lily said might be true. No wonder Lily's attitude towards Josephine suddenly changed drastically. No wonder she began to dislike Josephine. No wonder that when she mentioned buying an air conditioner for Josephine that day, she rejected it outright. She was such a fool, and she wanted to comfort herself. She wanted to protect herself, but she quarreled with her because of Josephine, and even yelled at her and smashed things. I'm afraid her heart felt extremely cold at that moment. When Zhaolin thought of this, his legs were so weak that he could hardly stand up. With tears in his eyes, he continued to scroll down the text message. "Now I've figured it out, you don't need me anymore. My mother needs me more. I left the key in the corner of the fire hydrant on the left corner of the stairs. You can stay there temporarily for one night. I'm here, $100 are left for you in the room. In order to buy flowers, I have almost spent all the money I saved. I bought the air tickets and this is all I have left. It should be enough for you to eat for 2 days. As for the future, you have to rely on yourself. I hope you will work well in the future. Fan Lily. Come back, Lily, wife, come back." Zhaolin sniffed and shouted in pain. He covered his cell phone and cried like a child. He wanted to call, but the other end of the phone showed that the other party was already there. Turning off the phone, Zhaolin was trembling with tears, thinking that he should be able to have a perfect ending with Lily. Such a good woman who was still thinking about herself when she was about to leave. Now that it was ruined because of Josephine's selfishness, he was heartbroken. He carefully thought about what happened in the past year. Whenever something unsatisfactory happened in his life, he did register on Weibo to post some of his feelings online. He took out his mobile phone and opened Weibo with trembling hands. It also recorded his complaints for the past 6 months, especially since Fan Bei asked him for a betrothal gift a few months ago. He searched for the information of people who followed him, and when he found one of them named Shenxian Yesifan when he was standing, a cold feeling sprang up from the soles of his feet. This is a small account with little information. It only fills in the approximate address and age of the other party. It has not posted any mood pictures and has not left any footprints on Weibo. But the above gods also think of fans as Binhai people, and the same age as Josephine, they are both 29 years old. What Lily said may indeed be true. Josephine was waiting for an opportunity to get close to her, and he deliberately wanted to destroy the relationship between himself and Fan Lily. Thinking of all the treatment he had suffered last night, Josephine, this evil wolf, had ruined his life. He was still so arrogant in the police station today. The law had no way of bringing him to justice, so he should do it for himself. Get justice. He gritted his teeth and remembered what Lily said about leaving him 100 yuan at home. Zhaolin wiped away his tears and returned home with a gloomy face. With the 100 yuan, he had a full meal first, then went to the supermarket to buy a fruit knife and put it on him. With the remaining change, he took a car to Josephine's community and began to lurk. He waited for most of the day before Josephine's car finally drove into the community. He had lived in this community for a period of time before. Although something like that happened last night, Josephine had told him to get out and threatened to call security. However, because he left in time, Josephine finally did not. The security guard was not called. When he saw Zhaolin coming, the security guard recognized that he had been here for several days, so Zhaolin entered the community smoothly. He waited at the entrance of the elevator in the garage. The pain and exhaustion in his body made him he was leaning against the wall at the corner. The lights were slightly dim here and it was also a blind spot for surveillance. He was wearing a dark green wrinkled plaid shirt and black trousers. He huddled up and hid like a mouse. In the shadows, Josephine was humming as he came back swinging the car keys. He didn't notice him hiding in the corner for a moment, and almost bumped into him. Josephine. When Xiaolin heard Josephine's voice, he inexplicably remembered his excited voice when he was lying on his body panting last night. A feeling of nausea and disgust came to his heart, and he shouted in a hoarse voice. "Why are you here?" When Josephine saw Xiaolin, he was startled, and then laughed contemptuously. "What? You tasted the feeling of being touched by me, liked it, and came to me again? What a pity that I saw I don't want you anymore. I don't care if I touch someone like you once or twice. After eating too much, I really feel bad about my mouth. I'll say hello to the guard here. You can go away. I don't want to see you again. I'm warning you, if you dare to follow me again, I will call the police and report that you are pestering me." After finally spending more than half a year with Xiaolin, it was not until last night that we finally took this mouthful of clear porridge and side dishes. Although the taste was not very good, it was because of the rareness that we had the upper hand. In addition, he successfully completed one of his achievements, so Josephine was still very happy. But when he saw Xiaolin, he didn't show a good face. This ungrateful person dared to sue him. It's a pity that he can't sue himself. Thinking of how helpless he was at the loss, Josephine couldn't help but laugh again. "You dare to sue me? You are an ignorant person. Did you make up your mind a long time ago that you wanted to break up Lily and I so that you could have that kind of thought towards me?" Xiaolin gritted his teeth. Under the dim light, Xiaolin's eyes were red, but it was a pity that Josephine couldn't see his expression at the moment. Hearing Xiaolin's words, Josephine was stunned, and Xiaolin quickly continued. "There is a person named Shenxian Yesifan following me on my Weibo. Is that you? You like men, so you used me as your prey and as a challenge. You approached me deliberately, you want to separate Lily and I, and then you want to play with me before we separate, right?" He reached out to grab Josephine, but when Josephine heard what he said, he reached out and waved him away impatiently. "Just keep talking, don't be too pushy. It makes it seem as if I have slept with you and will stay with you for the rest of my life. It's so annoying." He stared at me like I was looking at garbage. Xiaolin saw that he was stronger than Xiaolin. When Xiaolin was lifted up, the thin Xiaolin was almost pushed to the ground by him. Fortunately, he reached out and grabbed the wall tightly, and he was able to stand firm. After Josephine finished speaking, he straightened his collar, looked at Xiaolin who was clinging to the wall in a panic, and laughed coldly. "I didn't expect you were not stupid either. I really underestimated you. You even know this. But you are, so what if you know? I did it, idiot. So what if you know? Ha 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 ha, do you really think that a person like me will make friends with you? Take a quick look in the mirror and take a good look at yourself. You have what?" Josephine said as he reached out to pat Xiaolin's face. The pat made a pop sound, and he quickly moved Xiaolin's face to the left side, and a mark appeared on his right cheek. Xiaolin pursed his lips tightly and remained silent despite the large red palm prints. "Apart from wanting to play with you, who would want to be friends with a poor guy like you? Are you handsome? Apart from the fact that you are still in good health and worthy of some interest, what else is there about you that makes me want to associate with you?" Josephine curled his lips, and Xiaolin felt that his face was numb from the beating. He gritted his teeth and said resentfully, "I treat you as a friend. Why?" "Friend," as if he heard some big joke. Josephine put his hand in his trouser pocket and couldn't help laughing out loud. "You think of me as a friend? I have many friends, but it is absolutely impossible it's you. Go away, I don't want to see you again. If you don't leave, I will call the security guard." "Aren't you afraid of retribution?" Zhao Lin suddenly asked calmly. When he said this, his tone was no longer as hasty as before, as if he suddenly calmed down. When Josephine heard this, but he turned his head and said, "Retribution? Call the police to arrest me like you did this morning? I'm so scared." He clasped one hand on his chest and quickly grinned again. "What's the use of pity? Even if I raped you, so what? Why haven't the police released me yet? Zhao Lin, you can't play with me. I know Bin Hai better than you. This is my territory. It only takes a minute to prevent you from getting along. What I have more time than me is to spend time with you. I will drag you to death. You go and sue me for rape, sue me, let the police arrest me. You useless loser." As he spoke, he stuck out his tongue at Zhao Lin. His attitude was so arrogant that Zhao Lin clenched the fruit knife in his hand. "Have you never felt remorse for your behavior? Have you never thought about it? Will your actions cause much harm to me? Have you ever thought that I originally wanted to marry Lily and have children? Have you ever thought that you have ruined my life?" Zhao Lin kept asking, and Josephine became a little impatient. "I don't know anything, and I don't want to know. You deserve to be dumped because you were incompetent. If you can't find a wife, you can find a husband. You are already a piece of shit anyway. What's the difference if you sleep with someone once or twice? It has nothing to do with me whether you are destroyed or not. I warn you, don't pester me anymore, otherwise I will let you die. Have no idea." Josephine's words about finding a husband when he couldn't find a wife made Zhao Lin's eyes turn red all of a sudden. Lily had also said this when she was quarreling with him. At this time, these words greatly aroused Zhao Lin. He took out the things in his hand and shouted hoarsely, "Josephine! You forced me, you forced me." There was a soft sound of "pt," but Josephine didn't react at first. He only felt a sharp pain in his waist. It was as if something cold had been thrust into his body, and it was quickly pulled out. Before he could turn around, Zhao Lin pressed forward like crazy. The knife stabbed into his body again and again. Josephine finally came to his senses after a long time. He covered the wound and shouted in shock and anger, "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" Zhao Lin was indeed crazy now. He felt that he was cornered by Josephine. He came here today to seek justice from Josephine, but in the end he failed to seek justice. When I had to come back, I was ridiculed by him. Zhao Lin really couldn't bear it. He thought for a while, his whole life would be ruined or ruined. The mark of being touched by a man was firmly engraved in his body and soul. The feeling of shame was simply lingering. In the future, this would become his lifelong knot will never be resolved. Instead of living in such pain, seeing that his enemy was at large, he might as well seek justice for himself. He didn't want to live anymore. He wanted to die with Josephine. The fruit knife I just bought was extremely sharp. Once the knife went in and the red knife came out, although Josephine was strong, Zhao Lin didn't want his life at all. He chased after Josephine to chop like crazy. Soon, when Josephine ran to the elevator door, he was already dying. The originally sleepy security guard in the control room was almost stunned when he saw this scene. Josephine's hands were full of blood. Behind him, Zhao Lin was chasing after him like a ghost. The ground where the two ran quickly accumulated a large amount of blood, and the blood was stomped everywhere by the two of them. Seeing this scene from the monitoring room, it took the security guard a long time to react. Just wait until a group of security guards came screaming. Josephine's body had been stabbed more than a dozen times, and his whole body was almost turned into a sieve. He still had a breath left, so Zhao Lin calmly threw away the knife in his hand. After taking a few deep breaths, he dialed Lily's number on his mobile phone. Maybe she had returned to her hometown. After getting off the plane, the phone that was originally turned off was already turned on. As soon as he called, someone picked up the call quickly. "Hello? Xiaolin, are you okay? Lily asked, and tears suddenly fell from Xiaolin's eyes. He was not good, not at all. He had just killed someone with anger in his chest. Now that he had calmed down, he began to feel scared and trembled all over. The security guard's shout and footsteps sounded not far away. She quickly said, Fan Bei, I was sorry for you in the past. This life is over, and there will be an afterlife in the next life. I will never let you down. Don't worry, I have already taken care of the anger Josephine gave you in the past. It's over. Before he finished speaking, Lily heard the security guard shouting loudly on the other end of the phone. Soon the phone fell to the ground with a clang, a scuffle came, and then there was a rush to call for an ambulance and someone on the other end of the phone. The sound of calling the police. Mr. Joe, stay awake and stop the bleeding quickly. After hearing all this and thinking about what Xiaolin said just now, Lily sneered and cut off the call. At this moment, she naturally guessed that Xiaolin must have gone to Josephine for revenge. Josephine who plays tricks on others will be played by others. The old saying is true. Those who come out to hang out will have to pay back one day. Go back. It's not that I won't retaliate, it's just that the time has not come yet. Josephine had done so many bad things, he should have ended up like this. This is also a warning to those who play with their emotions and think they are as lofty as gods and gods. She started by planting a suspicious and violent shadow in Xiaolin, and gradually raised his body to be unsuitable for being played with. Lily deliberately broke up with Josephine. She had received the plot and knew Josephine's character. She must not be willing to give up halfway. She was sure that Josephine would find another way to get Xiaolin into his hands. Sure enough, after Josephine left briefly, he quickly intervened in their lives. Xiaolin broke up with her and then, in addition, Xiaolin moved into Josephine's house, and the flowers she sent catalyzed the immature relationship between the two. A young man like Josephine couldn't bear Xiaolin's temper, and finally used tricks to get Xiaolin. Xiaolin, whose body was damaged by Lily, was not suitable to be violated at this time. The doubled pain and physical and mental resistance made his hatred for Josephine multiply. The truth was that Xiaolin wanted to seek revenge on Josephine. She was not surprised at all. Because when she asked Xiaolin to call the police to seek justice, she had already guessed that Xiaolin's call to the police would not get any good results. Even if he was really raped, who would believe it? Not to mention he has no power. Xiaolin, who is lonely and helpless, will always make some unexpected moves when he is cornered. Logically speaking, Bei could deal with Josephine personally. But she didn't do that. Instead, she took a roundabout way and used a borrowed knife method to kill someone. Because she still has the original owner's mother to take care of, because this is what Xiaolin owes Fan Lily. In the plot, Fan Bei was so harmed by Josephine that she never even saw her mother for the last time. It became the biggest regret in my life. I almost ended up in the detention center. When I committed suicide in despair, Xiaolin, the victim, was too cowardly to come forward. He was injured and ran away, just surviving. It is true that he was also a victim like Fan Bei, but although Fan Bei was not his own killer, it was a fact that he died because of him. I didn't kill Boran, but Boran died because of me. He just took on the responsibilities he was supposed to have in the plot. Lily took out her mobile phone to refresh Ben Hai's news. At this time, people on the developed internet had begun to post, saying that in a certain high-end community, someone stabbed a resident on the first floor dozens of times and died of his injuries when he was sent to the hospital. With a few pictures afterwards. The blood was all over the floor and the walls. Some people below were speculating that it was a vendetta. They said that the deceased's surname was Zhou and the murderer's surname was Zhao. Both of them were men. Seeing this, Lily locked the screen of her phone. From the moment she entered the mission, she never thought about sparing Xiaolin. Sometimes honesty is not an excuse to forgive a person. Sometimes honesty is what really hurts someone. Human weapon. She called Fan Lily's mother in advance. Fan's mother was already waiting for her at the airport. Both Josephine and Xiaolin got the results they deserved during this mission. All she had to do was to be filial to her mother for Fan Beihe. Because of Lily's intervention in this mission, Fan's mother, who was supposed to die in a car accident, naturally did not end up like in the original plot where she could not see her daughter before her death. Lily found a job locally. He has always served his mother, even though he is not married. But Fan's mother only thought that she was emotionally frustrated and didn't dare to rush her. The two mother and daughter depended on each other until Lily returned to the starry sky. This time during the mission, she didn't know if it was because she had practiced the Tao Te Ching. Lily always felt that the sealed strength in her body seemed to be slightly loose. She felt the power of the stars in the sky more clearly than before. To a certain extent, she sometimes even had the feeling that if she tried just a few more times, she would be able to direct the stars to move slowly. Her information slowly emerged in the starry sky. Gender, female, variable. Name, Lily. Age, 21. Intelligence, 90, out of 100. Appearance, 93, out of 100. Physical strength, 89, out of 100. Force, 88, out of 100. Spirit, 90, out of 100. Reputation, 19, out of 100 points. Skills, 9 Yang Manual, 9 Yin Manual, Heaven and Earth Gate Tao Te Ching, Southern Gu Technique, Star Body Training Technique. Specialties, Advanced Cooking Skills, Advanced Acting Skills, 5 Elements and Bagua Skills, Proficient, B Control Skills. Charisma, 60, out of 100. Mark, the Power of the Royal Dragon. This time the mission was not like the last time where the attribute values increased significantly due to special reasons. Lily only increased the force value a little more. She took a look and saw that the attribute values in the starry sky slowly dispersed and entered the mission. The familiar feeling came and Lily closed her eyes. Beat him to death. Beat him to death, deafening roars came from all around. Lily seemed to be in an extremely noisy environment. There were a lot of people around her. They shouted in unison, and the sound was so loud that her ears started to cry. There was a buzzing sound, the eardrum seemed to burst, and the head felt like being hit with a giant hammer, and there was a dull pain. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 958. The smell of sweat and the fragrant smell of powder, mixed with the smell of rust and blood, made people want to vomit. However, there seemed to be a nervous and murderous atmosphere around them. Lily felt that something was wrong in the atmosphere. Even though her eyelids were still a little dry, she still opened her eyes with some difficulty. Her eyes were hot. She had just woken up and entered the task. Her spirit had not been well rested. She was still a little unclear about everything in front of her at first. She could only vaguely feel that there were people around her. After just one glance, she closed her eyes again. Is Miss Leumann feeling a little uncomfortable? Amidst the bustling crowd, a middle-aged male voice with a hint of gentleness and concern rang in Lily's ears. She subconsciously turned her head to look, but it turned out that she had just when she entered the mission, she had not completely integrated with the original owner's body. In addition, when she entered the mission, the original owner seemed to be in an extremely panic and helpless feeling. She was also affected. In addition, there were many people around her at this time. The noise really made her uncomfortable, and she had a severe headache. Even though she tried her best to turn her head to see who was talking to her, in the end she just hummed like a kitten. She reached out and groped, and there seemed to be someone sitting next to her. Lily leaned her head over without saying a word, but it was in vain. When she just leaned over, The person next to her didn't seem to like someone getting too close to her, so she moved aside. For a moment, Lily didn't touch him. The gentleman who had just spoken to her seemed to be breathing rapidly for a moment, but Lily couldn't care less. She cursed a few words, put her hands on her knees, and buried her face in her palms. After closing my eyes and relaxing for a while, my body gradually adapted to the intense atmosphere, and my heart was not beating as hard as when I first entered the mission. She then slowly sat up straight. Lily opened her eyes and saw clearly the environment she was in. She was sitting in a huge semicircular field that was hollowed out in the ground. Half of the entire arc-shaped space is filled with staircases stretching upwards, and each staircase is filled with people. The other half was made into a gorgeous private room with a cover. It looked a bit like an ancient Roman arena. About 20 meters deep underground, there was a huge platform of nearly 500 square meters. There are several circular arches around. At this moment, a dinosaur-like monster on the ground is about 4 meters long and drags a strong tail. It is currently surrounding a naked upper body in the field, with a handheld steel fork hanging loose. Hairman chase. The monster's eyes were now red. The man running in front had his cheeks flushed red and veins on his forehead were about to pop out. His feet were bare. Vertical and horizontal wounds were vaguely visible on the naked upper body. The man's back was covered with a strange totem-like tattoo. As he ran, the muscles showed powerful shapes, and his head was covered with sweat beads. Lily was sitting on the position was closest to the stands, and she seemed to be able to hear the man's breathing and heartbeat as he ran. A feeling of sympathy and compassion surged out of her heart uncontrollably. She almost gritted her teeth and stood up. Seeing the monster chasing the man, it seemed that it was about to swallow the man into its mouth in the next second. She almost wanted to the urge to jump down and rescue the man. Miss Roman is a kind-hearted saint from the church. It is normal for you to feel a little uncomfortable about such a situation. You can rest against the maid for a while, maybe you will feel better. The gentle middle-aged male voice seemed to know what Lily was feeling at this moment. As if feeling the same, Lily comforted her softly, and Lily nodded casually. She felt something was wrong now. With the improvement of her mental power, the situation of being influenced by the original owner rarely occurs anymore, especially now that her mental power has reached 90, it is logically impossible to be affected by the original owner. But at this moment, the urge to save people lingered in her heart, and she could hardly control her feelings. This was completely different from her original thoughts. The monster below was running with 2 thick and powerful legs, and the heavy footsteps seemed to cause the ground to tremble with each step. Although the man in front ran as fast as he could, he was still far away. Being gradually pulled closer. He ran desperately to an iron gate in the corner, slapped it hard, and shouted, "Let me out, let me out." Ang, the monster raised its head and neighed from its mouth. The sound shocked the entire underground circle. The surrounding area was quiet for a while, and then many people sitting on the stone steps opposite stood up and began to get excited. Of waving. "Kill him, kill him. Come on, you stupid thing." Lily also stood up. The next moment, the monster suddenly accelerated its pace. The man who was slapping the iron fence looked back. When he wanted to run away in fear, he was bitten into the mouth by the monster. The man held the hand in his hand. Before the attached steel fork had time to pierce out, the monster had already bitten the waist into its mouth. A terrible chewing sound was heard, and the clicking sound of the bones being bitten into pieces made the man with his bare upper body scream in agony. Submerged, a string of blood poured down from the corner of the monster's mouth. It chewed a few times, and its scaly neck rolled a few times. The bright red blood dripped down its chin and spread all over the place. It stretched out its huge. He licked his lips with his tongue, and then started running around the field like a winner. Such a bloody scene seemed to ignite the atmosphere in the venue. The people sitting in the venue suddenly whistled like crazy, clapping and screaming at the same time. In the auditorium not far away, several young men carried an antelope-like thing and threw it down. The monster had obviously experienced this before. Before the sheep landed, it jumped up again, bit the sheep into its mouth, and chewed it into its belly. After Joan was full, the originally locked iron gate opened, and a tall young man wearing gold armor, with soft curly hair, and carrying a long sword appeared in the arena. The monster's eyes were reddened by the blood, and it wanted to step forward when it smelled the breath of a living person. However, when it caught up and opened its mouth wide at the man, a dazzling golden light burst out from the man's body, and the long sword on his back was taken away. Down, slashed at the monster's teeth. There was a loud clang sound, and the monster wailed from its mouth. It no longer looked as contented as before. The huge body Clangdengdeng involuntarily stepped back several steps, and then the young man holding the sword shouted loudly, "Go back to your lair." There was a look of fear in the monster's eyes, and he turned around and rushed towards the opened gate on the side without looking back, and then the iron gate was closed. Paladin! 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 Seeing this scene, the emotions of the people in the venue were suddenly stimulated to the highest point, and they shouted like crazy. The young man raised his head and looked around coldly, then he thrust the long sword into his back without looking back. The gate on the other side was opened and he got in. "Why did Brian appear there?" a cold and soft voice rang, and Lily was startled. Her attention had been focused on the arena before, but after entering the mission, she was inexplicably attracted by the indescribable feeling in her body. Infected by sympathy, she didn't even have time to notice her surroundings. She began to feel that there were people around her, but she didn't turn her head to look. When she heard someone speaking, she turned her head and saw her right hand. On the side, a handsome man in his late 20s wearing a black velvet stand-up collared fitted robe is sitting there. There are some dark lines printed on his robe, which you need to look carefully to see. This young man has brilliant blonde hair. When Lily turned around to look, she only saw half of his delicate profile. He was sitting crookedly on a velvet black chair, and his clothes and the chair seemed to have melted into one. This velvet stand-up collared robe, which would have seemed a bit nondescript to ordinary people, gave him an indescribable aura when he wore it. He put one hand casually on his chest and the other on the armrest of the chair. The complicated lace of the white shirt underneath was revealed at the collar, and the cuffs could also be vaguely seen. However, this did not make him look feminine, but instead made him look more feminine. He has a cold and almost arrogant personality. The man's skin is very white, so white that it is almost transparent, without any trace of blood. His eyes are ice blue, and he looks emotionless. His light eyebrows are looming, hidden between his curly golden half-long hair, and his lips are light. He was pink, and the corners of his mouth seemed to be upwardly raised, but this faint smile did not make his face any softer, but rather made him look cold and hard to get close to. As he spoke, he seemed to carelessly brush away the non-existent dust on his clothes. Lily looked down at him. He was wearing a pair of brown leather boots, and a huge silver wolf was lying at his feet. He lifted it. He raised one leg and stepped on the wolf's head. The whole person looked lazy and luxurious, but also had a faint feeling of danger. Lily only glanced at him twice and felt that this man was not easy to get close to. She felt her attention, but the man did not turn his head. When he spoke, his voice was very soft, like a lover whispering in his ear. The intonation is also very beautiful, and it makes people feel very relaxed and comfortable when listening to it. A middle-aged man wearing a white robe lowered his head slightly after hearing his question, with a very respectful expression. He did not turn his head to look at Lily, but Lily could clearly feel that his eyes were on her. Stayed for a moment. How did this middle-aged man in white robe do it? Lily didn't notice it at all. She frowned warily and her body became a little tense. "Sir, I don't understand why Miss Roman's knights appeared in the arena." Please allow me to go and inquire. The middle-aged man spoke in a gentle tone. He was the man who spoke before. Although Lily didn't accept the plot, but the middle-aged man mentioned the name Roman twice just now. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 959. In the previous mission world, Lily was almost her real name. Except for one time when she failed at the beginning of the mission, she entered the story of swordsman and became Yu Ling Shan. Therefore, when the middle-aged man in white robe spoke at first, she didn't realize that this was calling her, but when she woke up now, she saw that in this luxurious space about 10 square meters wide, apart from the servants standing with respectful expressions, she was the only two people sitting there. With this handsome young man with blonde hair in black clothes, who stepped on the silver wolf. Except for a few maids standing arm in arm, there are no other women here, so the Miss Roman that the middle-aged man calls is most likely her. It seems that the mission world this time should be more Western style, so her name has also changed accordingly. Unfortunately, Lily has not accepted the plot at this time. The man in black in front of her does not seem to be easy to mess with. Lily instinctively she felt that he was very dangerous. Although this person was just sitting there quietly, Lily always had the illusion that he could snap someone's neck in an instant if he wanted to. She pursed her lips cautiously, remembering what the middle-aged man called Brian. It was obviously after the young man known as the Paladin in the scene drove away the monster, and the cold-faced man in black next to him the name Burnley was shouted out, then Brian should be the knight in golden armor, and the middle-aged man said that Brian was the knight of Miss Roman. If it was Miss Roman, it was the name of the original owner. Then this Brian is the original owner, and the original owner should be a saint from the Holy See. Thinking of this, Lily felt a slight headache. There seems to be something wrong with entering the mission this time. She still felt a little pity for the big man who had just been eaten, but her heart was still beating rapidly at this time, and she couldn't recover at all. Having entered the mission too many times, Lily is not a person who has so much sympathy. Although the scene just now was bloody, she herself had killed people to complete the task. No matter how compassionate she would never shed tears because of a stranger. I was eager to do something right now. That feeling was so weird that Lily gritted her teeth and took several deep breaths before suppressing the feeling of wanting to cry in her heart. After the middle-aged man in white robe answered the question of the man in black, the man in black, whom he called Sir, did not say anything. He just stared at the center of the arena expressionlessly. The middle-aged man's indifference towards him seemed to have already faded away. Getting used to it, he straightened up with a smile. He looked over at Lily, and then as if he noticed something strange about Lily, he asked with some concern. Is Miss Roman unwell? Lily could see clearly at this moment that he was indeed speaking to herself. This proved that her guess just now was correct. The Miss Roman mentioned by the middle-aged man was indeed her. The plot and memories have not been received yet. Lily didn't dare to agree rashly. She didn't know the character and temper of the original owner, nor did she know the relationship between the original owner and the young and handsome man next to her. It seemed that the man was not easy to mess with. She suppressed the weird feeling in her heart. Feeling, he responded softly. The middle-aged man glanced at the handsome man with a cold and unmoved expression in embarrassment. He was afraid to disturb the gentleman's elegance, but also felt some sympathy when he saw Lily's pale face. Sir. The middle-aged man moved his lips. The man who was originally as calm as a marble sculpture finally made a move and turned his head. As he turned his head, a fresh breath like orchid from his body passed into Lily's nose. The smell is light and fragrant, almost invisible, and it smells very good, even if it is set off by the large amount of bloody smell around it. Occasionally smell it and feel that the entire air has been purified. His pale golden hair swayed slightly as he turned his head. His blue eyes fell on Lily. When the man looked at him from the side, he only felt cold and emotionless. Now that he saw the front, Lily felt a little surprised. His cheeks were thin and narrow, making his already deep facial features appear even deeper. His lips were shallow, and he should have looked cold-blooded, but the corners of his mouth naturally turned up. When looking at his profile, Lily would feel that he looked like him at any moment. With a sneer in his mouth, he turned his head at this moment, and Lily realized that the shape of his lips perfectly neutralized the cold look he originally gave off. A pair of blue eyes are like the clear sea water under the sky, clean but aloof, but his light eyebrows are extremely long and have a beautiful arc, which neutralizes the indifference in his eyes. This young man's facial features are all cold when taken apart, as if someone has deliberately carved the most exquisite but not half popular sample, but when put together, it seems to be the most perfect masterpiece from God, forming a picture that will be very beautiful. A face that pleases women. He was not as imposing as Lily imagined. He just sat there quietly, his expression seemed a bit confused and lazy. His eyes did not narrow arrogantly when looking at people, but an invisible pressure made people feel a bit depressed. Out of breath. There was a bit of indifference and alienation between his eyebrows, but it was hard for people to dislike him. He was staring at Lily so quietly at the moment, but inexplicably it made her become nervous all over. He didn't even say anything or do anything, but Lily instinctively felt a little uneasy. This was not her imagination, because the silver-white giant wolf that was stepped on by the young man was lying quietly, but at this time the wolf moved, shook its head and raised its head. A few strands of silver-white hair flew up as the wolf shook its head, and soon flew onto the young man's black velvet robe. The velvet fabric was easily stained with dust, and because he was wearing pure black clothes, when the silver-white hair touched his clothes, it became particularly eye-catching. Almost in an instant, the temperature in his eyes quickly cooled down, and he lifted his foot that was resting on the wolf's head. He stepped on it with all his strength. Ouch! After Silver Wolf received this blow, his originally raised head was forced to step on the ground, and his lower jaw hit the stone slab underground, making a loud sound. The Silver Wolf let out a painful cry. The young man moved his foot away and kicked the wolf on the head. "I hate having things on me." The wolf's body was trembling, and he lay obediently on the ground in a surrendering posture. This time, he didn't dare to shake his head. The middle-aged man in white robe on the side looked at Lily apologetically, squatted on the ground, and took out a snow-white handkerchief. Carefully picking up the few strands of hair that were stuck on his body for him, the young man seemed to have been disturbed. He turned his head and glanced at the venue. At this time, the gate in the venue was reopened, and Two-Faces, the man with the totem tattooed on his body, was pushed out. He was a little bored and took out a handkerchief from the hand of the maid holding the plate. He wiped his hands elegantly and asked, "Leon, what did you just want to say?" The middle-aged man picked up a few strands of wolf hair on his body, wrapped it in a handkerchief, and stood up. "Sir, Miss Roman doesn't seem to be very interested in the Colosseum." As soon as he said these words, the corners of the young man's mouth curled up slightly, even if it was just a shallow smile, but his cold face seemed to break the ice all of a sudden. The whole statue suddenly became alive, but the smile did not reach his eyes. He quickly stopped smiling and threw the handkerchief that had rubbed his palm back into the tray held by the maid, meaning he said deeply, "You are really a loyal believer of the God of Light." The middle-aged man's face turned slightly pale, and after hearing these words, his back bent even more respectfully. "Since Miss Roman doesn't have much interest in this place, there is no need to stay any longer in the arena." Two big men were already fighting with weapons in their hands. They didn't know why, but they were working extremely hard. For a while, both sides took advantage of each other. The blood obviously made everyone in the venue a little excited. There were loud shouts of curses and cheers all around. Lily's eyes did not fall on the handsome young man at the moment. She was worried about the two men fighting together, and her eyes could not look away from the silver wolf who had not dared to raise his head after his head was stepped on just now. "Move the body away," This is really a ghost. She is not such a sentimental person. At this moment, she was sure that she was under the influence of the original owner, whose mental power was definitely not low. That's why she had the ability to influence her. She resisted the urge to step forward to appease the giant wolf. The two gladiators who were fighting in the field suddenly held the weapons in their hands and stabbed each other into each other's bodies. The two big men let out painful moans from their mouths, and Lily couldn't help but scream out in surprise. Her voice attracted the attention of the handsome young man, and she couldn't help but shout, "Sir!" She wanted to plead for the two injured men, she wanted to help these two people. Lily felt like scolding her at this moment. She didn't know where she was from or what environment she was in. Now she actually wanted to do it when she didn't even accept the plot and she wasn't very strong. To help others, she didn't know what kind of character the original owner was. Even if the soul in the body had been replaced by her own, she still had such a great influence on herself. Her shout just now had successfully attracted the attention of the handsome man. Those blue eyes fell on her face, powerful and intimidating. Lily felt like a poultry being stared at by an eagle at that moment, and her whole body became a little tense. The young man raised his eyebrows when he saw that she had called him but didn't speak. She took a deep breath. She could never say that she wanted him to help the two big men in the scene and asked him to be kind to Silver Wolf, even at this moment. She actually couldn't help but want to do that. The strong control still overcame the desire in her heart. Lily gritted her teeth. Seeing the young man looking at her in silence, she forced herself to turn her eyes from the arena to the young man and stared at him for a long time. "You are very handsome." As soon as he said these words, the faces of the well-trained servants around him showed forbearance and horror. Even the middle-aged man who spoke before looked at Lily in surprise, and then he quickly lowered his head. Obviously the young man was also very surprised. His cold and slightly reserved face showed a slight smile, and a bit of doubt flashed in his cold blue eyes. He nodded without saying anything and stood up. "Come." He is very tall, about 1.9 meters tall, and his legs are extremely long. I didn't feel it when he was sitting before. But now when he stood up, the sun shone through the arched stone window onto his pale golden hair. On the top, there is a bit of dazzling light. Lily stood beside him, her height only reaching his chest. His black robe was exquisitely made, with a slant collar, revealing a white shirt with exquisite and complicated lace underneath, and his waist was gathered with a golden ribbon, outlining the shape of his slim waist. He took the lead and walked towards the door at the rear. Silver Wolf, who was lying on the side, also got up and followed him. It should be possible to leave the arena here. The two servants at the door lowered their heads. As soon as he left, the air around him seemed to be much lighter, and it was no longer as oppressive as before. The middle-aged man stood at the door, making a gesture of invitation, and Lily quickly lifted up her skirt to follow. There is a separate passage coming out from the rear. The road is extremely wide, and the young man can walk in front without making a sound. It was not a long passage, but Lily felt as if she had walked for a long time. The claps and screams in the arena were still coming, but fortunately she didn't see the tragic situation there with her own eyes. The heavy feeling in her heart finally subsided a lot, and the smell of blood was no longer what she smelled in her nose. On the contrary, there was a vague fragrance coming from the handsome young man, which made people feel very calm. The first few soldiers holding spears guarding the arena saw a group of people approaching. They all bowed their heads respectfully, and the young man slowly walked out to watch and suddenly stopped. Lily didn't notice that he would suddenly stop, and she couldn't hold back her feet and almost bumped into him. The young man was very vigilant. Before she even touched the hem of his clothes, he moved aside without mercy. Lily couldn't hold back. When he gave way, below was a white jade staircase that was nearly 50 meters long. When I saw that I was about to fall down. Someone next to her reached out and gave her a hand. The gentle middle-aged man asked with some concern. "Miss Roman, please be careful." "Thank you." Lily came back to her senses, still a little shocked, and she frowned. "I am not such a restless person, but after seeing the scene in the arena before. Until now she couldn't calm down." Rows of gorgeous carriages were parked on the wall below the steps. Lily stood firm. The man in white robe quickly retracted his hand. The handsome young man did not say anything for his avoidance, but instead started going down the steps as if nothing had happened. From such actions, Lily could feel that the relationship between the original owner and this young man was probably not very close. A spacious carriage engraved with the Blue Eagle totem had already turned around when it saw a few people descending the steps. The two horses pulling the carriage were very strange. They were all white without a trace of color, but there was a long hair in the middle of their foreheads. People around him seemed not to be surprised by the silver horn. The middle-aged man looked around, frowned and asked, "Miss Roman, the Holy See's carriage has not come, and your knight Brian doesn't seem to be here." He glanced helplessly at the young man beside him. The young man frowned slightly this time and turned to look. Glancing at Lily and seeing her confused look, he suddenly said, "Go back to Itchery first and leave people here." He was in a high position and was used to giving orders. As soon as he said this, he didn't even ask Lily for her opinion and got on the carriage. A smile appeared on the middle-aged man's face. Lily somehow felt that the young man was very dangerous and didn't want to get into the carriage with him. But now she saw the middle-aged man looking a little happy, and then she saw the people who spoke had already got on the carriage and left. She hesitated for a moment, looked around and saw that there was no vehicle coming to pick her up, so she climbed into the carriage. From the outside, there is nothing outstanding about the carriage. Apart from the eye-catching Blue Eagle totem, this carriage looks very ordinary from the outside, but it is very wide inside. The interior layout of the carriage is not complicated. The top of the carriage is hollowed out and carved with patterns. The carriage is covered with soft pure white carpets. A soft couch takes up half of the carriage. A low table is placed in the couch to separate the soft couch. It was divided into two halves. There was an open book on the table with the crystal jewelry pressed in the middle. The young man who had just got in the car was lying on the corner of the soft couch. When Lily got in the car, she suddenly didn't know what to do. "Put your foot down." The young man didn't seem to care about her, and casually picked up the book into the drawer of the low table, then raised his head and stared at Lily. The car started moving slowly. The middle-aged men before, including the Silver Wolf, didn't even get on the carriage. Under the gaze of the young man, she walked towards the soft couch and sat down carefully and tentatively. The young man stared at her calmly. "Madam, I don't eat people." He was indeed not a man-eating monster, but the way he looked at people was more dangerous than a monster. Lily was so tense that she didn't dare to lean her back against the table. She didn't know who the young man was, nor his name, nor the relationship between the original owner and this man. In fact, at this moment, she really wanted to be alone and take in the plot. She instinctively felt that this mission was quite satisfying, but it was a pity that she had not had a chance until now after entering the mission. "I didn't know you would be such a reserved woman. In fact, I haven't had the opportunity to be alone with women before. I hope I didn't let you down today," he finished. Lily began to analyze in her mind. From what this man said, it seemed that the original owner had no dealings with him before, so this man probably didn't know much about the original owner's character. If this is really the case, then even if there is something wrong with her, this man who seems cold but is actually dangerous may not be able to see it. Thinking of this, Lily felt relieved. She nodded. The original owner had disappeared long ago. In fact, she didn't know whether she was disappointed or not. When the young man saw her nodding, his eyelids drooped, and the blue eyes were blocked under his eyelids. The cold and intimidating gaze seemed to be taken away by him. Lily instantly felt a lot lighter. Then, she breathed out a breath that was imperceptible. Beads of sweat broke out on his back. The young man, who was cold before and spoke no more than 5 sentences in total in the arena, now that there is no one else around him after getting on the carriage, his attitude is not as cold as before. He occasionally speaks, but his eyes are fixed on the ground, and his eyes are blocked. Behind my eyelids, I don't know what I'm thinking. Every time she said a word to him, Lily always thought carefully and carefully, fearing that any flaws would be exposed. Fortunately, the young man didn't seem to notice her tension. All the way back to the manor, the carriage stopped. Lily was breathing a sigh of relief and had not yet gotten up. The gentle voice of the middle-aged man outside the carriage rang. "Miss Roman, Mr. Bryan's carriage is already waiting outside the manor. He wants to take you back." When Lily heard this, her tense body felt a little relaxed. A smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. Just as she was about to stand up, the half-lying young man asked lazily, "I heard from Leon that you like Guy Ritchie's medical book very much. Is it good?" His tone was soft, and he seemed to have a kind of hypnotic magic power. It sounded as if he could hear the beating notes in his voice. "It makes people feel addicted involuntarily." Lily nodded subconsciously. When she came to her senses, she felt that something was wrong. She felt even more wary, but the man didn't seem to realize the coldness and longing in her eyes. Feeling eager to leave, he continued, "Send greetings to His Holiness the Pope for me." "I will." Lily was eager to leave. As soon as the man finished speaking, she thought of the identity of the original owner's body as a church saint. There was also a popular paladin beside her. She must have a high status and be able to meet the Pope. It didn't seem like it was anything surprising, so she responded in a low voice, said goodbye, and got off the carriage. She didn't see the cold-faced man reveal a hint of smile after she left the carriage. He smiled slightly and said softly, "Really interesting." The carriage that came to pick up Lily was already driving towards the manor very quickly. Lily didn't care to look at the scenery of the surrounding manor at the moment. When the 2 horses pulling the carriage stopped in front of Lily, panting heavily, the man in his clothes, Bryan, who was in golden armor, jumped down and stood beside the carriage. He quietly watched her thank the middle-aged man who had been taking care of her today. When he saw her turning around to leave, he stretched out his hand to her. Lily put her hand on it. Ryan easily held her hand and helped her onto the carriage. The appearance of the original owner's car was a bit cleaner than the carriage Lily rode in before. The car was engraved with an embossed image of a scepter, shield, and sword. She got into the car and leaned into the soft couch, followed by Bryan. He got on the carriage and sat next to Lily without hesitation, taking off the helmet he had been wearing on his head. To be continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 960. You shouldn't go out with a tree today. Bryan's voice was a little solemn. After he took off his helmet, he revealed his handsome face. He has curly, half-length mouse-colored hair, very white skin, eyes the same color as his hair, an extremely straight nose bridge, tight lips, and extremely sharp eyes when he stares at Lily. His appearance was not as perfect as that of the man in black robe before, like a masterpiece from heaven, but he had a kind of manly perseverance, revealing another kind of beauty. But Lily didn't like the tone of his voice. He gave off an extremely strong feeling, too revealing and domineering. Lily frowned slightly. Originally, she wanted to take in the plot while she was in the carriage, but now it seemed that Bryan had followed her into the carriage. Obviously, her wishful thinking had come to nothing. Lily did not say anything, thinking about Bryan in her heart. I wrote down what I said. Obviously the Atari he was talking about was the man in black who was called Sir before. but he didn't know what the relationship was between the original owner and him, and what the relationship was between Brian and the original owner. It seemed like these two people were similar. Very familiar. She pursed her lips tightly. When Brian saw that she didn't make a sound, his thick eyebrows gradually wrinkled, and his expression became more and more fierce. Although Art-Uri is from a noble family, he is not the right person for you. As a saint of the Holy See, your future husband should at least be an adult who believes in the God of light, not that one, Brian said in a serious tone. After a while, his eyes became cold, but he has a cold personality and no mercy. Today he will take you to the arena. It is bloody, brutal, dirty, and full of disgusting atmosphere. There are evil earth dragons there, those depraved people take pleasure in vulgar ways. He became more and more excited as he spoke. A fair face began to turn red, and veins appeared on his forehead. It was obvious that he had great opinions on today's group. The goddess of light is compassionate and beautiful. As a saint, you should cut off everything with Art-Uri relationship. As he spoke, he got closer and closer, and his white teeth were exposed from time to time as he spoke. It was obvious that Brian was extremely excited at this moment, and his breath almost hit Lily's face, and Lily's body moved unconsciously. Leaning back, the more she listened to him say this, the more her frown became tighter, until she was forced to press her back against the wall of the carriage. It was inevitable to avoid it, so he raised his head and stared at Brian coldly. She hasn't received the plot yet. Lily doesn't know what the original owner's wish and purpose are. No matter how dangerous Art-Uri is in Brian's mouth, even Lily herself feels like she wants to stay away from him, but she doesn't know if the original owner had her wish, she would not be able to promise anything to Brian. What's more, she doesn't know what the relationship between the original owner and this Brian is. She just looked up and met Brian's eyes. Seeing that she didn't speak, Brian's eyes showed a bit of disappointment. He stared at Lily coldly for a long time, then suddenly straightened up, took the helmet he had thrown aside in his hand, and opened the car door without looking back. Jumped out. As soon as Brian left, the air in the carriage suddenly became much lighter. Lily breathed a sigh of relief unconsciously, and then she sat up with her body propped up. The door was open, and there was no one outside. Brian was nowhere to be seen. The two unicorns pulling the cart seemed to be very intelligent and moved forward without anyone's instructions. Now that there was no one else around, Lily got up first and closed the carriage door. He leaned back on the soft couch and began to take in the plot this time. The mission world this time is called Lowland Continent. There are many countries, large and small, in the continent, and human beings are ruled by imperial power. The original owner's name was similar to the Chinese sound of Lily, and he was from the Roman family in the Noer Empire. His father was originally an ordinary viscount in the Noer Empire. When the original owner was baptized in the church when he was 7 years old, he was found to have an innate body of light, and was elected to the Holy See as a candidate saint. The Holy See has an extremely special status at this time. In the hearts of mankind, the Holy See is the spokesperson of the goddess of light, the daughter of the Creator God, in the human world. Becoming a saint of the Holy See is like the avatar of the goddess of light in the human world. It is a very worthy celebration. Humans in the mainland are proud to serve in the Holy See. Although the Holy See has no real power, its reputation in the world is very high. The moment the original owner was selected as a candidate for the saint, the Roman couple personally sent her into the Holy See. In the Holy See of the capital of the Noer Empire, the couple was summoned by His Majesty the Emperor because of their daughter's status, and Baron Roman was granted an exceptional title and made an earl, becoming one of the new nobles of the Noer kingdom. Every year, the Holy See selects a large number of young children to come in. The original owner stands out among the competition. She has worked hard to practice the holy canon of light, and in 10 years she has grown into a gentle, beautiful, and kind-hearted girl. There are also factional struggles in the Holy See, and Lily is just the most popular one. She is just one of a group of outstanding saint candidates. After becoming a true saint, not only will the Roman family's reputation be further improved, but perhaps their status will also rise. Back then, the original owner was only selected as a candidate for the saint, so the Roman family was summoned by His Majesty the Emperor and was granted the title of Count from Baron. Once Lily becomes a real saint, Count Roman will most likely be promoted from Marquis to Earl. The original owner was 17 this year. Seeing that she was approaching the age of marriage, the Roman family began to look for someone to be her lover, hoping to help her take the next step. A saint must serve the Holy See all her life and cannot marry. However, people in this world do not have a strong concept of chastity. A saint is not required to be a chaste virgin. Brian, the personal knight beside the original owner, was originally supposed to be her backup in the future. One of her lovers, it was just because the Roman family was full of expectations for their daughter and did not allow her to give her first time to these vulgar men. In addition, the original owner's character was truly pure and kind, so that film was kept to date. But now, with the fierce fighting within the Holy See, coupled with the ambition of the Roman family to move forward, Count Roman treated his daughter like a commodity and began to order her to travel among the powerful people, trying to select the right one among them. The person who is most beneficial to him hopes that his daughter can seek benefits for him. The original owner had a gentle and obedient personality, and she followed her father's instructions and wandered among a group of powerful people. Because of this, the personal knight gradually became resentful of her. She and Brian had a lot of affection for each other. They both believed that they would be each other's lifelong lover if they decided to dedicate their lives to the goddess of light. Count Roman's actions directly ignited Brian's dissatisfaction. He was young. He is young, but his strength has reached the level of a knight captain, and his future is unlimited. He has even derived the power of the bright knight. He feels humiliated that Count Roman is selling his daughter like a commodity. Although he was originally just the future wife of the original owner, responsible for meeting her physical needs and protecting her safety, as Brian's strength increased, he began to be dissatisfied with this situation. He was far more possessive of the original owner than more in the past. Count Roman's actions directly caused a rift between the two people who had been so close in the past. The original owner felt very painful about this, but on the one hand, she was her favorite knight, and on the other hand, she was her own parents. Her character was originally so kind that she was weak and therefore did not know how to reject others. Under such circumstances, Brian was even more disappointed with her, which led to Brian betraying her in the end, quitting the Temple of Light, and following another girl named Anna. Brian's betrayal was like a knife in the heart of the original owner, but she was still kind and generous and did not resent Brian. Instead, she sincerely blessed him. On the other hand, the Roman family members kept urging her to continue. Wander among the rich and powerful, choose a suitable person to devote yourself to for the first time. At this point in the plot, when Lily thought something would happen that would make the original owner feel devastated and sad, the plot came to an abrupt end. There was no unexpected incident, and even the end of the story had not yet appeared. It was only inexplicably received that Brian had betrayed Lily and betrayed the Temple of Light for the girl named Anna. The plot suddenly stopped at this point, and Lily closed her doors, unwilling to give up. I closed my eyes and tried to take in the plot again, but my mind was blank. Apart from the memories and plot I had received before, there was nothing else. Even though Lily was calm for a moment, the urge to scold her still came to her heart at this moment. Without the original owner's wishes and the original owner's ending, her mission was like a headless fly. She didn't know which direction to go at all, and there wasn't even a hint. Lily suddenly held her tightly. He shook his head, resisting the urge to yell, and forced himself to calm down. Her previous hunch was correct. This time the mission was really difficult and there was nothing. Even though the original owner felt sad about Brian's betrayal at the end of the plot, She clearly did not blame Brian and blessed him in the end. What to do with this task? Ha ha ha, Lily laughed dryly. During the time she was receiving the plot, the unicorn pulling the cart had returned to the Roman family and suddenly stopped. The carriage door was suddenly pushed open, and a woman wearing a blue skirt with a waist commonly seen among aristocratic women poked her head in. Before she could see the Lily leaning on the carriage, she asked, "My dear, how was your date with Grand Duke Achuri today? Isn't he perfect?" This is the original owner's mother, Mrs. Roman. If the Roman family wants to serve their daughter well, they can help her get on the real throne. The candidate for the position of saintess has settled on a few princes who really hold power in the Noer Empire. The original owner has met with several people in the past few days, but in the end it was nothing because of Brian's sabotage. For this reason, not only Brian was dissatisfied, but even the Roman family members were extremely hostile to Brian, who had ruined their good deeds. Today, the original owner went to make an appointment with the real leader of the Achuri family, Grand Duke Turi. To be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 961. In this mission world, Achuri is also nominally a duke, but since the Noer Empire went to war with another empire 300 years ago, the Achuri patriarch had made military exploits and was canonized as a duke by the emperor at that time. After ceding the northern fiefdom of the Noer Empire, including the frozen forest, to the Achuri family, 300 years later, the Achuri family had long since taken over the northern territory originally named Olives. Really changed its name to Achuri. Although Achuri still holds the title of duke, their strength far exceeds that of the real duke. As early as more than 200 years ago, people in Nolan continent were accustomed to treating Achuri as a monarch alone. Even the emperor of the Noer Empire has acquiesced to this fact, but in order to show his respect, Achuri still respected the Noer Empire on the surface and called himself duke to the outside world. Therefore, in order to distinguish the difference between Achuri and ordinary dukes, people in Nolan continent call the rulers of the Achuri family generally the Grand Duke, or Grand Duke for short. Compared with ordinary dukes, the Grand Duke is naturally slightly better. Half a month ago, the leader of the Achuri family suddenly entered the Noer Empire palace. The arrival of the Grand Duke seemed to ignite the enthusiasm of the nobles of the Noer Empire. After finding out that this young and handsome Grand Duke is still single, before marrying a wife, many people have already begun to have thoughts in their hearts. Although the Roman family has a poorer background compared to other families, the Roman family is better because their daughter is a saint of the Holy See, clean and pure, and has a high status. Very special, this is undoubtedly the most dazzling aura of the original owner. Count Roman tried his best to get a date between his daughter and Archduke Achuri. It's a pity that the original protagonist in the plot did not seize this opportunity, because she was completely suppressed by the young and ruthless Archduke in front of the indifferent Achuri. Accompanying him to the arena, this kind-hearted girl, apart from crying for the slaves who died innocently in the arena, the only impression left in her mind was that the Grand Duke was so cold that he seemed to have no emotions, as clear as the sky. His eyes were as blue as the ocean. Nothing more than this. And during this date, her personal knight and lover Brian finally couldn't bear it anymore. After this party, he met Anna, the girl who finally made him betray the Holy See. Afterwards, Brian also walked away like this time, and Achuri did not take her home first like this time. Even from then on, when the Roman family took the initiative to come forward again, the response they got was the ruthless rejection of the Achuri family. Lily didn't know what happened after that, because the deceiving plot had been cut off at this time. Thinking about it, if Grand Duke Achuri had no interest in the original owner, and the original owner was in pain of being betrayed by Brian, there should be no intersection between the two. Lily took a deep breath and closed her eyes. After receiving the plot, she finally understood why the original owner's own spiritual power was so powerful. It is actually because the original owner entered the Holy See since she was a child and was constantly brainwashed. The Holy Scripture of Light she practiced has an extremely weird telepathy power, which people in this world call the power of faith. To put it bluntly, this so-called power of faith is the result of the extensive development of a certain kind of spiritual power. It is somewhat similar to hypnotic brainwashing, which strengthens the firmness of believers. Priests and candidate saints mainly focus on cultivating spiritual power. It's just that this power of faith is a little weird. It has a special bonus effect on spiritual cultivation, and the original owner's mind is very simple and direct. Therefore, after 10 years of training, her power of faith is very deep, so this is where Lily enters. The reason why she was almost affected by her own personality after the mission. She closed her eyes and did not speak. Instead, she threw the woman who asked her aside. The woman finished asking with interest. Seeing that Lily did not speak, her brows suddenly furrowed. She held up the hem of her skirt and pushed open the carriage door. The plump body climbed onto the carriage nimbly, and with some arrogance, he ordered the servant to close the door and hide away, and then he leaned towards Lily and pushed her. Did you enjoy your date with Grand Duke Achuri today? Did he hold your hand and ask you to meet again next time? Only then did Lily remember the presence of the Countess. She didn't have much affection for the original owner's parents. The couple purely treated their daughter as a commodity. In order for his daughter to bring long-term benefits to the Roman family, he did not hesitate to send the original owner to the sect, and finally served in the Temple of Light. For the future development of the Roman family, he asked his daughter to maintain her integrity for more than 10 years while actively serving her in the future. When looking for a lover, I never consider the feelings of the original owner. Even if the original owner can eventually become a saint, the saint's actual tenure is only 5 or 6 years, starting from the age of 18 and ending at the age of 24, until a new round of saints is selected again. No one can still hold the position of a saint after they grow old. Once a saint leaves her position, she will never leave the Holy See for life. She cannot have children like ordinary people. Most of them end up becoming some archbishop or priest in the church. She is the plaything of the mistress of the royal family and a powerful person, and she lives alone all her life. For an ordinary woman, this seems a bit desolate. But for Lily, becoming a saint is good, but she doesn't like the behavior of someone treating her as a commodity. The Roman couple's actions actually made the original owner. The reputation has suffered a certain loss. The original owner has always been clean and self-sufficient in the Holy See. His reputation was originally good, but the recent arrangements made by the Roman couple have caused some nobles to focus on this poor little girl and treat her like a plaything. If the original owner hadn't made an appointment with Grand Duke Achuri today, many people would have attacked her early in the morning. Although the reputation of the candidate saint for the Holy See sounds good, for many people who hold power, this not only does not make them feel afraid, but also makes them more excited. Everyone wanted to hold such a pure and holy girl under their bodies and play with them wantonly. Lily didn't say anything. The Countess reached out and bumped her anxiously. Hey, let me ask you, baby, did he kiss you? You are so charming, just like a lily, men can't resist your charm. You believe me, the Countess also has a lover, she looks fresh and clean. Daughter, with a hint of jealousy in her tone, recently, Marquis William also wants to date you, but with Archduke Achuri here, who is willing to pay attention to him. No, Lily frowned slightly, showing a bit of coldness on her face. In fact, she and Achuri will not interact with each other again after today. The man who is so cold as if his heart has no warmth is not interested in her. Interested, and even after this meeting, the original owner was never contacted again. Mrs. Roman would definitely be disappointed. Impossible. When the Countess heard Lily's words, she shook her head. You got on his carriage, you got on the Achuri family's carriage, how is it possible? Didn't he tell you that he wanted to make a date? Will you meet again next time? Lily was a little impatient. This mission gave her a feeling of fog and confusion, making her confused. At this moment, she was eager to find a quiet place to process the plot and memories she had received before. Shun didn't want to talk to the Countess anymore. When she heard her denial, Lily sneered. "What did he tell me? What did he have to say to me?" Her voice was a little cold, different from the gentle and obedient appearance of the original owner in the past. The Countess was obviously startled by her cold attitude and was stunned for a moment. Lily frowned. When she said that Achari and she had nothing to say, she suddenly remembered something, and a lot of cold sweat suddenly broke out on her back. Arturai had spoken to her, and he had indeed spoken to himself. He didn't say much when they were in the carriage, but before Lily left, he asked himself a question. He said, "I heard Leon say that he was obsessed with Guy Ritchie's book, the medical book, liked it very much and asked her if it looked good." At that time, Lily never thought that he would not tell the truth. His expression was too careless when he spoke, as if he was just chatting accidentally. At that time, Brian happened to go to the Alita family to greet her, so he nodded subconsciously. But now, after receiving the plot, Lily wanted to scratch her head. The original owner and the Achari family had never met before, and this date was all arranged by the Romans. In fact, she guessed that the name of the middle-aged man in white robe was the lion that Arturai said, because Lily had heard him call the middle-aged man's name in the arena. The middle-aged man treated her very gently and took care of her several times. It was not even possible to tell that it was the first time the two met. The middle-aged man acted as if he was already very familiar with the original owner, so much so that Arturai said, "Listen to Leon." When she said that she liked Guy Ritchie's medical book, Lily didn't notice anything strange at all and nodded. She didn't know Leon before, how could he know what books she liked? The most important thing is that the Light God sect produces holy water, and the Holy See claims that holy water can cure all diseases. At this time, the emerging medical skills are regarded as heresy and evil magic by the people in the Holy See. People who are truly loyal to the Holy See will despise and dissatisfy them when they hear the word medical skills. However, Arturai, a cunning man, deliberately asked that question. It was clear that he deliberately set a trap for her, and Lily actually did it. Got in. When the middle-aged man expressed her uncomfortable state to Achari, Achari once said something dissatisfied, saying that Leon was a loyal believer in the Temple of Light, and the original owner was the saint of the Temple of Light, and that was the believer. The two words made Lily believe that the middle-aged man was indeed related to the original owner. The two masters and servants worked together to put on a good show and trapped her in it. From the beginning, she was attracted by Leon's concern. Confused. To be continued.